Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I would have hit record about 30 seconds earlier because Donovan Mitchell just posterized Porzingis. Would have been a cool way to start the episode. But hot start either way. We got Cavs Celtics on in the background. Celtics couldn't respond. They foul Max Strus on the other end. Missoula just playing through the dunk. No timeout. Vicious chat. Mitchell, one of the best, of course, dunkers in the league, but just the body control that he has on the dunks, chat. The ability that he has to get sideways into a dunk and then dunk it on a guy, because that can be underrated as well too. That just attack a guy straight on, shield the ball, be able to climb up over the top of the big, and be able to throw it down. Incredible. Cavs, of course, have the momentum right now as they're trying to be able to solidify their spot at the top of the Eastern Conference. And I guess there is other teams to concern, to worry about in the NBA season. I mean, it just feels like everybody right now is just focused on Mavs, Lakers. I mean, obviously focused on the trade, but just the optics of wanting who do we want to see next? Top of the list. It's like I want to see Davis out on the court in Dallas, and I want to see Luka out on the court in LA. And more immediately as well too, we want to see De'Aaron Fox out on the court in San Antonio. But obviously the magnitude of the Luka trade is a much bigger deal, and that is a little bit fortunate for the Spurs as well too. That it's just the magnitude of that deal ended up not being, a crazy move either. So we'll definitely have something to say about that too. But continued a lot going on in the over the weekend. Like we had the Davis trade, of course, with Doncic, and the NFL guys are starting to get ideas as well too. Myles Garrett requested a trade. He's the one that requested a trade because I think Cooper Kupp came out and said that the Rams requested that he request a trade from him. It's the first time the team has ever gone to the player and hey, can you request a trade from us? Obviously, players will do that, or teams will do that for players without knowing. But I don't know if Cooper Kupp, was there a conversation? Did he overhear something in the office? Have the Rams come out and said that that's not true? I don't think that. I don't think that they have. I don't think there's been a report, because I don't know if it's did Schefter go out and say as well too that the Rams were shopping Cooper Kupp? I think the reports were Cooper Kupp said that he is on the market, and it's oh, we better believe what the man says. So we'll see, if these NFL guys are going to be moving around at the same rate as these NBA guys. But I think this feels like the most interested we had to have been in two teams that, again, you don't want to say they're not title contenders in the Mavs and the Lakers. The Mavs, of course, are still trying to talk themselves into being a title contending team. But I was just thinking about the most exciting right before we hopped on, just because, again, watching Celtics Cavs, this is a much superior game. These are two teams that are immediately right now at the top of the league, contending for championships, ready to win the title. These teams are in the odds, both above the Mavs and the Lakers. These teams are in, the hearts and minds of the NBA fans. We have them all above the Mavs and the Lakers in our own power rankings. But regardless, I want to see Anthony Davis with Kyrie Irving more right now than I want to see Tatum and Mitchell and the Cavs and stuff, and even the long-term success of the season. Boston, they kind of have that, I don't know if is the back-to-back title that intriguing of a storyline for the Celtics. It always is intriguing to see if a team is able to establish that kind of, prominence in the league, that kind of historic feat. But, I guess Boston has just been in, a lot of long playoff runs, we assume that unless their season continues to get rockier than maybe it has been in the past, we assume that they're going to be in the mix at the end of the year as well anyways, kind of regardless of what happens. So, same with Cleveland, they'll be winning the first, we assume that they'll be winning in the first round of the playoffs. They'll be divisional round, maybe, against Milwaukee or something. It'll be a tough matchup against Giannis, but we'll see what happens. And the other times you're interested in a team that's not really content, again, these are title contending teams. The times you're interested in a non-contending title team, it's usually for the sake of a young player, and you're just focused on it's more the interest in one guy. I was trying to think NFL teams that maybe aren't teams that you're like, okay, this team's gonna win the Super Bowl, but I like need to watch this team and need to see it. And last year, at least to start the season, one of the must-watch teams for me would have been the Bears with Caleb Williams because of Caleb Williams. And it's like, we have to see this guy in the league, and we have to see what kind of potential he's going to have. And again, you're not expecting and I think Bears fans and some people, I mean, I'm sure you can check the tapes for us. We still thought the Bears were going to be a feisty team in the league with the potential, who knew how good their defense could have been as well last year. But it's not like they're going to go win the Super Bowl. But it's like, yeah, they're still going to be higher up on the must-watch power rankings as a team than they are going to be a contending team. Again, that's the thing. Like, the Mavs and the Lakers are the number 1 and 2 like must-watch team in the league right now versus any of these other contending teams. And the Mavs are actually playing right now too against Philly. We've got that one second screened. Oh, shout out to the Mavs. They're making a little bit of a comeback here. Pause. 45-39 in the second quarter. Philly was winning, and Philly's like the one team that you can maybe play at this point and feel better than just as a franchise. I mean, I guess, there's other franchises as well too that regardless, like that's the thing about the Mavs as well too. There's still other franchises that you would just not trade places with. If you're the Mavs, are you at this point? That's a tough question, chat. Should we pull up the Tankathon rankings here real quick? Like, would you trade places with these teams that have the chance to get the number 1 pick? Because I guess that goes back to what we were saying in the defense of the Davis trade. And I guess we're not, and I want to make it clear as well too, like we're not necessarily defending the trade. I just want to continue to defend Anthony Davis as a player. Because like, again, this trade did happen over the weekend. So when we did the live stream on Monday, like, we hadn't gone back in for a shift at work yet and like gauge kind of what is the vibe of the people seeing what this trade is. And immediately it's just like, you walk into work and it's just like you immediately hear people. It's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's like, I already know what they're talking about. They're talking about Nico Harrison. But, nobody at once has just been like, yeah, you know what? Davis is like an awesome. I mean, people have obviously said that Davis is an awesome player. I think actually a couple of people have now said that like the Mavs have won the trade, which again is like an aggressive thing to say. Like, I'm not saying the Mavs won the trade because, again, like at the end of the day, you're looking at the math of, oh, Porzingis tried to get his revenge on Jared Allen, but Allen with the massive rejection. Garland for 3, in and out on the other end. Cleveland would have gone nuts if that one would have gone down. And we don't really have sound on, but I just want to see the Cleveland fans go up and down like they're in a video game. Like they're just me characters cheering on their team. But Jared Allen with the defense, chat. Whoa. Porzingis had vision. Donovan Mitchell, like we said, dunked on him right before we jumped on. Porzingis had visions of at least trying to match it in the highlight reel. Like, obviously, he's not going to undo the highlight, but you get a highlight of its own. It's like, yeah, okay, Porzingis, we get it. You're a great player. But Porzingis twice now on the wrong end of 2 highlights in the game. Top 10 of the night. I think Porzingis might be 1 and 2 in the wrong way, chat. That's a pause. But, like we were saying with the Davis trade, do you actually want the pick of, do you want the collection of random picks? Because that's the thing, obviously you could have gotten maybe 1 or 2 more things with Davis, but also when people like are saying that the Lakers need to get 1 more pick, I get it. You need to get as much for Luka Doncic as possible. And there was also a report as well too that the trade got whittled down, which is even like, even if you want to defend Davis as an individual player, like just the management of that is kind of just aggressive, not even for Luka specifically, but just for any player. The fact that you could start with an offer and just be willing to get assets taken away from that deal is, obviously like just kind of mismanagement as well too. I just want to clarify on the Davis thing. It's like, yeah, obviously the Mavs are not, it's not the A+ move, but it's not the worst trade in NBA history, because I've seen that as well too. And I've seen people trying to compare this to like NFL moves, and people were like, explain the Davis trade in NFL terms, explain this if quarterbacks gotten traded. And the common one that's being floated around right now is Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow got traded for Dak Prescott, which is pretty close. Like, I get it. The Joe Burrow Doncic thing is not a bad comparison. Both a couple of striking blonde young superstars, but also have been in a title game. Unfortunately, came up short in the title game, but have made kind of runs earlier in their career. It's also an interesting comparison because Burrow entered the league kind of as an older quarterback, whereas Doncic entered the league as like a younger player. Like Burrow and Dak aren't really that far apart in years, I don't think. Dak is like 30 some now, 31, but it's like 4 or 5 years apart. Whereas again, Davis, you start looking 6-7 years difference. We're almost 2 contracts in at that point for a guy. But I was trying to, and I don't know if there is like a perfect quarterback version of the comp, and it does have to kind of be a quarterback comp because I was trying to think with the Myles Garrett trade request as well too. I was thinking, well, like if the Lions traded Hutchinson for Myles Garrett, would we think the Lions are going to be in a worse place to win the title next year because Garrett's older than Aiden Hutchinson? But that's a little bit different as well too, just because of the impact that an individual, like, you have a great defensive lineman. It's like, obviously Hutchinson was playing like the best player in the league, and just him being insane is, you're going to take that every day of the week. But there's that class, and like we're saying with the players as well too, there's that class of players that you can build a title team around. But it's like, yeah, Garrett is like, that's probably a little bit closer. I don't know if that comp is perfect with the edge rusher position anyways, in terms of comparing it to an NBA thing, or like a receiver swap as well too. Like if somebody, if the Vikings traded, maybe that's a better one. Like if the Vikings traded Jetta for Tyreek Hill, because with the receivers, some of the age thing can be maybe a little more steep with the decline as well. But if we were going to stick to the quarterback comparison, I was thinking maybe it's a little more like if Burrow got traded for Stafford. If we want to stick with comparing Burrow to Doncic as well too, because I think that one fits pretty good. Pause. Hey, yo. Whoa. That's crazy. That one I actually might have to like sit here and time out for a second. That's not good, chat. That's aggressive. But because if you're trying to compare him to the young talent, like obviously Mahomes is, in terms of regular season accomplishment, maybe Lamar, but Lamar has never made the title game. Mahomes just wiped out all these AFC guys making the title game outside of Joe Burrow. And does the NFC really have the young talent? Like you could say Hurts, but then we probably think Doncic is more, has a little bit higher ceiling of the way he can elevate a team than Hurts. Whereas Hurts is obviously a great quarterback. Maybe he's also just a great quarterback playing on a great team as well too. So the Burrow one is pretty good for Doncic, and the Stafford, it's close both ways, because I think Stafford maybe has a few less years than Davis, maybe one, one less year in his peak of his powers than Davis, but still, like I would give Davis a little more leeway in terms of how he could, how many seasons he could have left at his prime at this point than Stafford. Stafford is like 36, so Rodgers is 40 at this point, like. If he does have the Rodgers run, I guess you're thinking 3-4, if you're going to get 4 years for Stafford as like a Pro Bowl level or, playoff Pro Bowl level quarterback, a guy that can impact playoff games and give you those big level drives, 4 years would be pretty optimistic as well. 3, I don't think you'd be surprised. Same with Davis. So, but with, comparing Stafford to Dak, like Stafford has had moments in the playoffs where he has achieved. He has had moments where he literally won the finals, wasn't the finals. Kind of similar to Davis as well, too, where wasn't the finals MVP. Cooper Kupp was the Super Bowl MVP in that game. And rightfully so, like the player that was, statistically awesome that year. And Stafford was a big reason because of that. Like, we don't necessarily look back at that season and say Kupp was carrying Stafford. We just kind of say that he was the best player in the offense that year. Like Stafford was an amazing quarterback, and Kupp is on the market right now. And they brought in Puka Nacua, and Stafford has, and before Kupp, we saw Stafford be productive with other, like we knew Stafford was potential to be a great level quarterback, and was also able to kind of have this second prime in a way as well too in LA that is really crazy, and has really been able to solidify his career as a great quarterback, because he always would have been a what if quarterback. It always would have been the question of if Stafford had the team around him, would he have been able to win the Super Bowl? And even if that is just the one that he gets, if he's not able to get 2 or whatever, even if he's not able to get back in the game. Like, the fact that we actually saw Stafford do it, like, pause, is, is, like we're saying, definitely puts him into that tier of quarterbacks where, you're not going to rank him over an all-time quarterback like Moreno. And even here, like, saying certain names, it's like these are top 10 guys. But, there are some guys on the list that, again, it's like the NBA guys. They don't have the ring, So, if you put Moreno and McVay's offense on those Rams teams, obviously they're probably going to get the same result. But the point is, if Moreno can win the Super Bowl, it's like, well, so can Stafford. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's the level you need to get to as a player. It's like, Stafford solidified his greatness. Like, just the greatness that Davis has had in the playoffs is being overlooked at this point. And I get that, again, like we're saying, Doncic in the face. And that's the other part of it as well, too. Like, just what he meant to the organization. Like, I don't know if that was necessarily calculated into the trade. Whereas, Nico Harrison, I guess he just thought that the entire Mavs fan base was just, these cold-blooded assassin, we need to do anything it takes to win the title. And, again, even if, like, there are probably versions of the Doncic trade, like we were saying, going through, like, maybe there's, if they had actually done Giannis for Doncic and called Milwaukee and pulled that deal off, like, are the Mavs fans waking up sad today, But Doncic, I think Giannis is in even a tier above Doncic, like we're saying. He's in a Jokic, then Giannis, then, Shea, then, take your pick. But, there's only a couple of versions of the trade, obviously, where, like we were saying, the Mavs fans can, like, wake up and, feel super happy about it at the end of the day, just because of what Luka meant as a figure in the organization. And, we had a little bit of this with Kawhi as well, too. But again, like, Kawhi asked out. So while the Spurs, you could look back at the Kawhi situation and go, the Spurs were obviously, if you want to take Kawhi's side and look at the medical thing and go, they weren't necessarily giving him the right advice and not necessarily prioritizing him instead of the franchise and blah, blah, blah. And, like, the Spurs definitely had their reasons as to why Kawhi was requesting the trade. But he also had a reason as to why the fan base was able to mentally, there's like a mental breakup that you're able to do with him as a player. Whereas, there's not, I guess there's only like really like actually sad relationship parallels if we do this. Because again, it's not even a breakup. And it's not even like, if you're like, the Mavs fans just wandered home one day and all of a sudden, Luka Doncic just like left with all this stuff. Because again, like, Doncic didn't leave. Doncic was, of course, was doing things to the Mavs organization that, he's poking the bear, chat. Like, make no mistake. Doncic, like Nico Harrison was saying, with some of the work ethic stuff and the defense, obviously, in the finals and in the playoff run last year. And that was another thing as well, too, that was circulating with this trade, was the Windhorse clip of him ripping Doncic after that finals game. And obviously, with that clip surfacing, I remember that happening. And the performance that he had defensively in that finals as well, too, has stuck with us in terms of, I mean, when we laid out that case of guys for people you'd want to have to take over Luka to win the title, like, defense is the main reason that you would take a guy, if you're going to make the case for a guy like Ant or a guy like Paolo or a guy like Shea over, or even Tatum, over Doncic. It's going to be because of that defensive two-way aspect that they're able to provide. And that's definitely been something that I've valued in ranking him as a player in terms of his standing in the league. Oh, there's that Mitchell dunk again, chat. Vicious highlight. One of the cleanest dunks. And you love a good, like, guard dunks on a center as well, too. Checks all the boxes, chat. Cleveland fan base, always great at reacting to highlights as well. Great, fan base in general when they're rocking. But, like, Luka was definitely, like we were saying, maybe not the easiest guy in the world to work with, but, like, if we want to actually start making the chat sad now with, like, relationship comparisons, there's not really one to go to sort of make a draw and make a comparison. But I guess we were going to see, like, what would you rather have? Like, would you, if you're the Mavs, would you want to flip spots with one of these fan bases? You know, if you're the Mavs, would you want to switch with Washington right now? On pace to have the number 1 pick. Obviously, the top 3 teams all have the same odds. So it's not like the fact that they're, a couple of wins or a couple of, wins worse, I guess is the right way to say it, than these other teams. It's not like that is a, priority in this because the lottery's odds are set at what they are. But would you want to trade with Utah? And I guess this all depends on who does get Cooper Flagg as well. But as we stand right now, headed into the playoffs, would you want to trade places with Zion in New Orleans? Charlotte? Charlotte's a little bit interesting, There's a lot of fun talent there. You get LaMelo. You at least get the, the lookalike chat. At least it's the same type of player, the young superstar that you've drafted and is like homegrown. It's like, well, if the Mavs fans have a type, at least we can navigate over to the Charlotte Hornets fan base. But, like we're saying, at the end of the day, I don't think that this is going to be the worst trade in NBA history. Because, again, Davis is a special talent, and he's an all-75 guy. And unfortunately, they're just getting him at this really they're this really like crossroads section of his career, because I was going and part of the reason why they're doing the trade as well too now, like we were saying, I think we mentioned this on Sunday, but if Davis is your target, and again, it's not that is the correct move, it's just to lay out their thought process. Like if Davis is your target, at this point it's like you do want to get him on your team as soon as possible, because he is going to be going, he's going to be 32 as you hit next season. And I was looking at the history of players, the history of like center guys after they hit 32. And let me see, this is going to be another did we screenshot it moment, Chad. This is just the new segment on the pod. Did we screenshot the stats we were looking at earlier? We'll take a look. Okay, we did. Of course I screenshotted it without the number that I needed to look at. It was the number of seasons that a center scored 20 points or more at the age of 32. This is the list of guys that did it. Kareem was the number 1 leader. I think he was at 7. Pat Ewing was 2. Hakeem was 3. Issel 4. Wilt. LaMarcus Aldridge. Shaq. Moses Malone. LeBron is on this list because there was a couple Lakers seasons in there where, the last couple Lakers seasons where he's been getting those like center power forward minutes. So he does crack the list just because of that one season. David Robinson is also on the list, and then Clyde Levette is also on the list. But I think only, let me see. Actually, I screenshotted it with the years, so I can just look at the years. 5 of these guys did it multiple times. 6. LaMarcus Aldridge did it multiple times. Okay, so shout out to LaMarcus Aldridge as well too. But, you look at the list and it's like only 2 guys have had like, a 4+ year run of even 20 points a game impact. And, I was looking back at like Tim Duncan's career and Garnett's career as well too. And like those were guys that after 32, like were still able to be massive impactful players. Like Tim Duncan, of course, won a title after the age of 32. Like that Spurs team continued to contend in his defensive presence in the center of that team, and just his general posting up ability, like his ability in that offense was always a go-to thing. And same with Garnett. Garnett in those later Boston years was a major impact guy. But if Davis is going to enter even that phase of his career, like even everything that we were saying about Davis being an all-75 guy, like that's the part about Davis in this trade that you need to actually work out is, yeah, Davis can still have a career, we'll say a typical career of one of these legends that, these center legends that they've had where they've at the peak of their powers and, early when they enter the league, and then they hit this later phase that Davis was just in, later 20s, early 30s. And then, like we're saying, early 30s, they're able to still impact, but maybe not carry in the way that you need. And you're still relying on Davis to carry this team. But to be honest, again, I think that's kind of being lost in all this. And I'm kind of excited that at least that this is a potential storyline that can come out of it. Like, sorry that the Mavs fans are on the, the poor receiving end of this. And, Unfortunately, it's going to cost them Luka Doncic to have this experience with Anthony Davis. But again, like we haven't had Anthony Davis as the lead guy on a contending title team. And has it been 6 seasons, chat? How many seasons was he actually in LA? 5, I guess, half a season. And they traded for him in the offseason, right? That wasn't a deadline move. So it's not like he has 2 half seasons to make a full season in there. Little baby season. Yeah, 6 years on the Lakers. And again, he's out right now. So those Mavs minutes are not going to quite register yet. But, he was 25 the last time he was in this position as the prime guy and had the ability to lead his team. And again, even in this season at 25, like 56 games played, and I'm assuming the 18-19 season, they did not make the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, he didn't even make the playoffs that year with New Orleans. So that experience with him was even cut short as well, too. So really, again, at 24 years old, that 17-18 season was the last time was like Anthony Davis was on a team by himself as a peak guy with like, okay, well now Davis is Davis has the opportunity to do it. Like, pause. Let's see what he can potentially muster up in terms of carrying a team. And, in one way you look at that and go, okay, like that's a big career. What if for Davis? Like, it works out at the end of the day. Like you go to LA, you win the title with LeBron, and you put up the numbers you make the all NBA 75 team. Like from a legacy standpoint, you're totally fine. But he was one of those guys, and he was a former, like Luka, gets the label as the former generational talent. Like Davis was that guy at one point too. Like if we were actually ranking number one, or just, draft picks in general, but obviously the number one overall picks would be the highest valued guys just in the individual years, I guess, except for the Anthony Bennett year. But, if we were just ranking draft prospects from even, let's just say like the 21st century, since 2000, like Davis has to be in the top 5. Like, just thinking of like a quick list off the top of my head, chat. Obviously, LeBron and Wemby are going to be the top 2. And then at that, like literally at that point, we start dropping down to, I guess is Cooper Flag in the mix now. But yeah, it's the Anthony Davis, the Zion, of course, retrospective is obviously, a little bit weird at this point now. And it's interesting too, because he did have some injuries that were starting to mount up by the end of the Duke run there and going into the NBA draft. So it was already maybe even like a little bit like, okay, is he even going to be the 100% version of the Duke player that he was? Am I drafting a 99% version of even, just like a little bit even of a tick down from that. But, yeah, Wemby, like Anthony Edwards wasn't a guy that was just a consensus top pick, same with Paolo. Paolo eventually ended up going number 1 overall, and that was the right move. Not just for the fact that they drafted Paolo on that team, but the fact that he ended up being, the best player in that draft. It's like, that's totally, that totally looks to be the correct thing. Like, you're not going to put Cade up on that list. I feel like I'm leaving out like a major player. Again, you've got like your Dwight Howard, Yao Ming, Towns, Ayton, Edwards, Paolo, Reece Shea. How could I forget about Reece Shea? So yeah, is that your top 5 just most hyped prospects of the thing? Oh yeah, and then obviously Luka. I was getting stuck on number 1 picks there, and the fact that Luka is number 3 kind of messes it up. But even Luka is like the only guy that kind of fits like that. Like any of the other 2 and 3 picks, we'd have to do the retrospective on and go, oh, like we were actually. And again, maybe the Bennett year with Embiid being the 3rd pick is the other one. But, like Halliburton as the 11th pick in the draft, that's an obvious one with him being so far down. But, like LaMelo as the 3rd pick in the draft, Mobley as the 2nd pick in the draft, Amen Thompson as the 4th pick in the draft. Like, he might be a guy that, we rank as a great young talent in the league, but we're not going to go back and do the, where were they at as prospect rankings? Some people did have them like super valued as prospects, but even still, they weren't above Wembanyama in this own draft. Like, they're still behind those guys. So Davis probably as a draft prospect, if we're doing that rankings, probably is over Luka in that way, just because you would, as a tie-breaking situation, even you would have to look at it as just the consensus in the moment was Davis was by far the number 1 overall pick, and Luka, at least there was even some, little bit of debate in the moment. Just like literally the only two people that disagreed that Luka shouldn't have been the number 1 overall pick were the 2 teams above him, or I guess the 3 teams, because the Hawks traded away too, which were other jokes that I was seeing as well, which was like, the Mavs now don't have the worst trade involving Luka Doncic. And again, going back to that draft night trade with Trae Young and Doncic in the first round pick that the Hawks got as well too, which I believe was Cam Reddish. So it's like Trae Young and Cam Reddish for Luka. And I guess we could go and look at what they could potentially have gotten as well too at that spot. But again, I kind of like this trade even a little bit more than that one. Like, the both versions of the trade, I don't have Luka Doncic. So would I rather have Trae Young, or would I rather have even like a 30-year-old Anthony Davis? Guess what? I'm still probably taking a 30-year-old Anthony Davis. Like, shout out to Trae. Shout out to Trae Young. Like, Anthony Davis is still, still really cooking. So I don't want it to sound like, we're taking a lesser version of Davis. I'm just saying, even if we're factoring in that age thing, and I could go back and start it all, day one with Trae Young, or get to this point in the timeline now where I have 7 years of Luka and then trade him for Davis. Like, I'm still doing this version of it and not going back and doing the draft night trade and switching it out for Trae Young. Like, I can't even mess up and trade Trae Young for Anthony Davis at some point. Like, Trae Young doesn't even have that kind of trade value right now. Trae Young probably has good trade value now this year. He's playing pretty well. Pretty unselfish, in terms of at least the shot selection stuff. Seems like he's, mellowed out a little bit on that. But the fact that Davis now, at least there's a couple of seasons at the end of his career to continue to add to that legacy. Because it's not even just prospects this century. Like, big man prospects in general, he's right up there in the list with all of them. And like we were saying, that list of guys that were able to extend their prime a little bit, like it is some of those, it's Shaq, it's Hakeem, it's Kareem, it's, David Robinson was on that list. Duncan, of course, we had that list sorted out by 20 points a game. Like, Duncan wasn't hitting that scoring mark, but as a guy that, again, was impacting title teams, like, he was a guy that was still able to have that continued success even into his later 30s. So, or, mid 30s or whatever. And the Celtics just up by 20 now. They've crossed the 20-point threshold over Cleveland. They're not messing around to start the second quarter, chat. Garland cuts it back to 18. But, from a talent standpoint, like, he is in the mix with all those guys. He's on the All-NBA, All-75 team. And if you look at the numbers that he's put up right now, up until this point in his career, like, they are special numbers. And the problem, with him, of course, has always been the health thing. So some of the totals and some of the career overall marks are not able to match, what some of these other guys have been able to do. But from a per game standpoint, and of course, when Davis is out there, he has been absolutely one of the most dominant big men that has ever played the game. And now he at least there's something there. Like, he has the shot to be a special guy again and carry a team in a way that he just could never have done with LeBron James. Like, even if LeBron James continued to, have the, just father time sets in, and as LeBron continues to play and as the production, continues to decrease a little bit, like, it would have had to really fallen off to the point to where we were now, like, really considering this Davis's team. Like, LeBron would have almost had to have taken a Haslam-like role to where, like, Bronny's now, like, maybe not even a star, like a rotational guy, player on the team. He's getting good minutes. Like, he's out there contributing, but, like, you're like, okay, his spot in the league is set and he's good to go. And now Bron can take, like, a back seat, sit on the end of the bench, kind of coach the team, be there supportive. And because make no mistake, if if he can't play on the Lakers and Bronny can't play on the Lakers, then we'll be seeing him request a trade. Like, he'll be out of there. Let's get Bronny some minutes somewhere else. What team will have the LeBron? Somebody will take the LeBron jersey sales at the end of the bench to get Bronny some minutes at that point. Like, make no mistake, it'll still be able to happen. But like, LeBron will be at the end of the bench still demanding trade value, and Davis will still not be getting legacy points because LeBron will still be on the team. But that doesn't matter anymore. And it's unfortunate as well, too, that I think, was it Will Cain that said that he literally said if Davis wins a title, it doesn't matter. Like, he wants Luka Doncic, which is like, okay, Mavs fans, like, settle down a little bit. Like, at the end of the day, we're all trying to win a title here. So if you win a title, it's like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, I get it, Luka's the homegrown guy, and it's also the most emotional investment they made in the moment. Like, if Nico Harrison was literally the one guy on the planet that was right, I don't know, for some reason the Mavs fans would be more concerned with being right in the moment than actually winning a title. So it's like, okay, tamper your expectations a little bit. But, the fact that he does have this massive role that he just can't, like, he can't ever be what Luka is to this team, He can't be the homegrown guy. He can be a great guy. He can be a great guy in the community. He can be a great, like, Davis can become beloved to the city. That's not a question. Like, and that's another part of, like, this is all just being forgotten. If Davis is great, he will be beloved. Like, I get the dynamics are different, but you'll still be able to move on, chat. Life will still be good on the other end of it if Davis is still able to produce. But just, like, even Doncic was there for 7 years at this point. What, 6-7 years? Like, is Davis going to give you 7 years of what Doncic gave you up until this point? So just, is he even going to have the time to potentially have those moments with the city that Doncic had just as a basketball player, not even as a young talent that they drafted and watched develop into a basketball talent and watched him, become one of the better players in the league. But again, just the individual Davis legacy has a potential to take a turn here, and he has a chance to really climb the rankings in a special way. Because again, you're never going to elevate him not just over his own number one, but you're not going to elevate him over some of these other number ones as well. And these other top guys, they seem kind of at a distance right now for Davis to get, like, him actually, getting on a legacy ranking up past, like, Tim Duncan and a guy like Jokic, even Giannis, who's carried a team to the title at this point. Like, those are all guys that might be top 20 guys in NBA. Moses Malone, like, Davis climbing up. Like, could Davis be a top 20 guy in NBA history when this is all said and done? Like, because he's 31, it seems like it's a little bit of a reach, but it's also, it is also one run away. Like, it's on the table now for Davis if he does it, where he could climb up and we go, that guy that was that number one overall pick, that generational talent, that kid at Kentucky that led his team to the title, and we were like, he's going to do this in the NBA, and just never quite did. It's like, well, he actually finally did it, He was finally able to pull this off, pause. And am I just setting the table for an all-time jinx here on Dallas? Like, they already need as much good luck as they can. Like, they don't need me over here just saying as much positive. They're already like, cool it, we want to be negative and just brace ourselves just in case. That's what it's got to be, right? It's not that they're disrespecting Davis. It's just they're bracing themselves for the worst. Because if this happens, then it's amazing. Like we're saying, Will Cain is only saying that he doesn't want to win a title with Anthony Davis because he's like 102% certain that it's not going to happen. But I guess I'm sitting here telling you, like, there is a, the win probability, it's not at 99 yet. There's still a couple of percentage points. The house doesn't win every time, chat. So is that just the number one promotion to ruin your life? The house doesn't win every time. That's how things go really south. That's how Nico Harrison gets himself in trouble, chat. But sometimes the gamble works. Sometimes it works. And there's just no comparison. There's no precedent. There's no there's great player for player swaps in NBA history and throughout history. But, just the stage at which they're trading these guys in their careers, what they've accomplished up until this point, and what's left for them to accomplish potentially, just, like we're saying, it's the most riveting storyline. It's the most riveting storyline in sports right now. If it is rigged, I mean, the NBA writers are cooking something special. Maybe, I mean, the NBA writers are using AI. This is an AI move. Because if the NBA is scripted, it's not been scripted like the last couple of years. You know, they've been scripting it. I mean, it's been scripted all the way. Go back to '85. You know, the lottery chat, Pat Ewing lottery. You know, maybe David Stern was the original scripter of the league. Maybe he's the one that stepped in and is like, okay, we can't take anything to chance. Like, we need to make sure we're dictating these storylines as much as possible. But make no mistake, this is a good one. This is a really, really good one. I get that there's a couple others you could have potentially gone down, like we're saying. The Giannis one is obviously right there. But I kind of like Giannis staying in Milwaukee. Again, he's already won a title. Like, sorry, Mavs fans. Giannis means more to Milwaukee than Luka means to Dallas. The Mavs fans are going to kill me for saying that. They're like, you can't speak for us. You're right. I can't actually make that statement. But I'm just, you know, from the outside looking in, how can a guy that actually won the title mean more to the organization than, or, you know, mean less to an organization than a guy that didn't? And I get that there's been maybe even more turmoil with Giannis than there has been with Luka, but that's just, you know, that's what happens when you're in a relationship for so long, chat. Sometimes you're gonna look elsewhere, you know, you're gonna bat eyes elsewhere. Sometimes Giannis is gonna be like, hey, you know, I've noticed you've, what's this, just like, the you need to get in a gym relationship equivalent when you need to like go get a superstar, you know. He's like, hey, I've noticed maybe here's a gym membership for Christmas, you know. I don't think you get it I think you just get it to get it, right? I don't think you delegate a holiday gift toward it. But I'm just excited for that part of the Davis legacy thing as well too, which is not something that, again, I was thinking about in the moment as well, as I continue to try to be the one person out there defending Anthony Davis. But it's like, okay, we're actually back to the Davis storylines that we wanted to see when he was drafted, you know? These are the original Anthony Davis TV show storylines that we were promised in the early seasons. And then he had this pivot to LeBron. You know, it worked out. They were great. They were entertaining. We loved it. You know, like we're saying, the Davis storyline, he developed as a character greatly as well, too. Like, we're not going to... Are we going to go back and keep him on the Pelicans for those 7 years? Like, I'm not saying do that, you know? There was something there at one point with the Cousins, Rondo, Drew Holiday crew, but they weren't doing anything long-term, you know? And, I mean, we've seen what they've been able to do. Like, that organization literally can't get off the ground, you know? Actually, now might not be the time to be making jokes like that, chat. But, you know, this organization literally, like, even with all the talent they've been able to acquire over the last couple of years, have still not been able to turn it into a successful team. Still not a team of guys where you're like, you know, I wouldn't change a lot of what they've done. You know, I get the Zion thing has been disastrous, but from where they've been drafting, the guys that they've taken, like, feels like they've made the right move over and over again, and yet they just can't seem to put wins together. Like, yeah, maybe Davis doesn't get to stay in New Orleans. I don't know where the other spot would have been at that point in the league for Davis. Should we go back and look real quick? What did the league even look like? Do we need to do a refresh when Anthony Davis was in New Orleans? Obviously, he got beat by Golden State Paws a couple of times in the playoffs. Was both of his playoff series losses to Golden State? Let's see here, chat. Oh, that's right. Yeah, both the losses were to Golden State, and they swept Portland that one year. So that is even something interesting looking back at the Davis retrospective as well. It's like, clearly they weren't going to beat those Golden State teams, you know? Like, only, you know, that's only reserved for LeBron James at that point. And especially if we're scripting the league, like with where LeBron's at post-Miami in, you know, I don't know if, you know, you want to be able to script LeBron into as many seasons as possible, but you just don't know, like, how long is LeBron going to be able to go for? Pause. Like, is he going to be able to play until he's actually 40? Like, do we need to get this guy a title right now while he's in Cleveland? And he's going to be the only one that the league is going to be willing to usurp that Golden State team. Word of the day, chat. Usurp. I think we use that right. But I mean, to lose to some of the greatest teams in NBA history is not necessarily like a smudge on the playoff resume, for sure. But the 2018-19 NBA season, this would have been the Raptors season. Giannis MVP. Luka was rookie of the year. Last time Davis was the number one guy. Just a crazy. It's a small world, chat. It's a small world. It's crazy how the dots seem to always just connect to one another. I mean, that like doesn't really even mean anything that Luka was rookie of the year that year. It's just like, you know, the same names keep popping up over and over again. So Milwaukee probably would have just gotten Holiday at this trade deadline as well? Or would this have been the next season? Bledsoe still on the team. I think maybe they actually acquired him in the offseason. So they acquire Holiday in the offseason. I mean, that would make sense, especially after Davis gets hurt. The Pelicans finish, lower than you would expect as well, too, after, it was seeming like you were trending towards something cool. You've got Harden still on the Rockets. You're going to have Dame and CJ in that backcourt. Tatum and Brown, a young Boston. So you've got Brooklyn. Is Katie on Brooklyn? Is this the year Katie's out? D'Angelo. Oh, no, because the Raptors won the finals. Duh, yeah. So they're playing Golden State that year. Katie, everybody's in Golden State. But Kyrie would be in Brooklyn and be just waiting around for Draymond Green to make Kevin Durant mad and for Kevin Durant to run to the arms of the Brooklyn Nets and for him to just have a midlife crisis in Brooklyn for a couple years. You've got Butler and Ben Simmons in Philly. Indiana, would this have been Paul George or Oladipo? Is this the Oladipo team, chat? Oladipo, yeah. Making a first team All-NBA, second team maybe, in the mix. MVP level performance that year from our guy Oladipo. DeRozan, of course, LaMarcus Aldridge on the Spurs. I'm guessing we wouldn't have gotten the Paul George, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trade yet, because like we were saying, Paul George had just gotten traded to OKC, but you would have had that version of the team with Westbrook. So this would have been the year that they lost to the Blazers on the shot as well, too. So was there like a Portland potential? Could he go to Portland with Dame and be like the number one guy, Dame as the sidekick? That does some interesting stuff for the Dame legacy, where now it's like, well, Dame not being able to get Portland a title in a way, like Davis swooping in and stealing that honor from him would be kind of interesting. Houston, you're not going to make like a Chris Paul for Davis trade at that point, because Chris Paul is, even at that point, you're like, how many years do we have left? But that would have been an interesting combination with him and Harden. Denver's really starting to peak this year as well, too. But again, Jokic, you're not going to be making a move there. Is he going to go play with Embiid, Boston, Indiana, Toronto, Milwaukee? I don't know. From a fit standpoint, not that he couldn't fit anywhere. It's just like, from a legacy standpoint where he's going to be like clearly the guy in the team makes sense. It's not like there's like a obvious glaring spot for him. I guess San Antonio maybe as the one if the Spurs just put all the pieces on the table for Anthony Davis at that point. But like we saw that trade, it was just, such a crazy move. But I am just, like I'm saying, excited that at least Davis can have a chance to ascend the legacy rankings like this. Because I don't know if a guy as well, too, in his late 30s has also had the, not the opportunity to do this, but again, just that, guys in their late 30s don't get traded to be the best players on teams. Like they don't get traded for young guys. Like they don't get swapped around like that. So just a continuous unique situation. Every side you look at it, every way to process it. And again, it's not that Dallas won the trade or Dallas made a defensible move. It's just that Anthony Davis as a player and as a legacy and just as a storyline is still something that is very, very special. And again, to have to give up Luka Doncic to participate in that as a Mavs fan is not the tax. The tariff for bringing in Davis was Luka Doncic. It's like, what is going on? I don't know, chat. These tariffs are out of control. But, Davis is a good quality product, Davis is good American made. So don't be too sad, Mavs fans. Don't get too down in the dumps about it. It's not the worst move in the world. That's our defense of it. That's how we'll make you feel better. It's not the worst move in the world. There's worse things that could have happened. You could have traded him for Markkanen and picks. To be honest, I kind of like that it wasn't a lot of picks too. Like that would be fun, and it makes sense. You're gonna do the reset, gives you this open playing field to do whatever you want. But get a guy for a guy, Just if you're gonna trade a great player, get a great player back. And it's hard to get a player of equal value, It's just there's situations, and I mean attachment is part of that as well too. Like the attachment that these guys have, like that's usually calculated in. Like it literally had to be this perfect storm of situation where the GMs dealing with each other like are friends and buddy about it and willing to give each other a good deal. Like if Billy Buckets was running the Lakers, would I be, less willing to throw in a first round pick? Maybe, who knows, chat. But you've got these friends that are GMs, and then you've got this player that is still beloved to the fan base, but is causing these fractures within the organization that the fans are not necessarily seeing and not having to experience on a day-to-day, and that are not, again, maybe not justifiable reasons to trade a guy, but for the why as to a reason as to why the team would make that move. Like this is the perfect storm of events for that type of thing. So, I guess we'll just continue to process it and continue to think about it and continue to see what'll happen over the course of the season. But like I said, it's the only thing that I want to see right now, chat. What does Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving look like? Because that's even a fun combination. You just, in a vacuum, those are two talented guys that, maybe meeting at a weird part of their career. Like, that's the other fear of this as well, too, is this is one of those teams you look back at and go, oh, man, like, what if Davis and Kyrie were at the peak of their powers? Like, that team could have been something. And a peak PJ Washington, then maybe you really got a big three there. But, people have also mentioned Davis not having to, have to take the role of a center, like as full on as the way he was doing in LA at times, because they do have Gafford and they do have Lively. And it's like, hey, you know what? That does matter in a way, because it's not that Davis is not a great center. Like, we get that. But you think about what Davis is going to have to do offensively now. And not that he wasn't, again, even being responsible for a ton in LA. He was still the lead offensive guy. He was still the guy that LeBron was the guy that I guess, was facilitating everything, but Davis was still the primary force and the primary bucket getter for the team. But in a way that the focus is going to be on him now, and the way defenses are going to be able to just be shifting their attention to him in a little bit of a different way, to have a guy next to him that can defensively take some of the burden off is going to be a key thing. And Lively is a great young talent. Like, they also, they didn't have to give up Lively in the deal either. They didn't have to give up all their young pieces to give up Anthony Davis. Lively's a great player. He's no Luka Doncic. He's no franchise cornerstone in that way with, sorry, Derek Lively. But, Derek Lively for his role is one of the best players in the league. So I just, let's not forget about that in this, what I'm saying as well, too. Like, I'm not disrespecting the man. I'm just saying, for the various roles, like, he doesn't fit the role that Doncic was fitting on this team as the, that lead offensive face. But for him and Gafford to play next to Davis, like, that's great. Outside of that couple of games with DeMarcus Cousins, this would probably be the best centers that he's played with. I mean, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, like, who are the guys that he played with in LA? Who are the guys that he played with in New Orleans outside of Cousins? Was there a Valanciunas run in there? There was a couple of international guys with some names that I don't want to. There was like a Mirotic run in, who's the one guy that Montezumas? There's like a Montezumas in there as well. He was more like a kind of a four though, not necessarily a center, more like a kind of a true power forward. But this is going to be the best big man sidekick that Davis is going to have. And Kyrie as well, probably the best backcourt bucket getter that Davis has played with. Because he's played with LeBron, who's this wing playmaker, who's LeBron James, but, the wing playmaker, different type of shot maker than Kyrie, where he's going to focus and shift the defense in a different kind of way and has the ability to take advantage of a one-on-one in a different way, LeBron is obviously a mismatch in a one-on-one in the post and with his physicality, but if Davis is really just menacing in a game and the defense has to focus everything at him and it's a big matchup and, a big mismatch for the team and it's like, oh, we have triples and 4 guys are looking at Anthony Davis on every possession. Like Kyrie's going to pick you apart in those situations. Are these better than things that the other teams in the league have to offer? It's like, okay, that, obviously that's where we start really picking nits. And the other big part of it as well too, and I think we mentioned this on Sunday, but just to, mention it again because it is important, is Luka is a mismatch for the Nuggets. The Nuggets didn't have a guy to match up against Luka in that kind of way, where Jokic is and has proven to be able to not just neutralize Davis, but like, let's be honest, I guess Davis has had good games against Jokic, like statistically good games against Jokic, but Jokic plays good defense on Davis, and Jokic just in general, like, I'm kind of almost in a Steph Curry mind with Jokic, and maybe I'm actually late to the table with it as well, but like, Jokic is a good defender, Jokic is not, same with Steph, like, yeah, maybe Steph is not going to be a guy that you're going to want to switch every LeBron James, big power forward onto and just hope that he holds up into the post. Like, yeah, maybe you're not going to want Jokic switching out onto guards all game, but in the, the 4 out of the other 5 aspects of defense or whatever, dropping back and just, whatever the other roles that he has to play, like his strengths are really strong on defense, even if he has a weakness that can be picked on every once in a while. And he can stay in front of Davis. He can make life difficult for these guys. And again, that's why Towns is crazy. Towns cooks Jokic. I forget who we were saying that was making those jokes, but it's like, hey, man, you look at the numbers. Towns puts up good stats against him. But again, so does Davis. So, like, that's a weird thing where just mentally you go, okay, we've seen Jokic have success against Davis in the playoffs. How do we feel about that matchup? But Kyrie versus Murray is crazy, and we saw what the Mavs wings and the size of the rest of that core did to the Denver, role guys as well last year. So maybe you feel pretty good about that spot. So, hopefully Mavs fans are able to wake up out of their coma at some point. Fortunately, Sunday, like Groundhog's Day, when the trade happened, fortunately, like, wasn't actually the movie. Because if Mavs fans just had to wake up and just the day that they were constantly reliving is the Luka Doncic trade, maybe that is the day you want to relive, though. Like, Mavs fans, let us know. Slide in the DMs at Rem and Sam on Instagram. Would you have rather had it be a Groundhog Day situation? Because if it is one, then you have the ability to potentially work your way into the system and stop the trade from happening. On one hand, you say, oh, I'm a Mavs fan. I have to just suffer with the news every day that Luka Doncic is leaving the team. And maybe after, 2,000 days of reliving it, I'll be able to, wake up one day and just rationalize it. Or you get proactive about it. And you go, I got to stop this thing. Because you could legitimately, like, make up that point in your career as well, too. Like, yeah, like the schooling that would have to be done, like you could potentially earn a degree as well. Like, could you establish full relationships? I guess you're not brainwashing these people up until that point of their lives. It's just up until that day. But I think you could, with enough repeat days, figure out how to go in and stop the Luka Doncic trade. Because let's be honest, if Groundhog Day, you wake up and Luka Doncic, the trade day is the one you're repeating, like, what other way would there be to break out of that cycle? The only reason you're stuck in that time loop, like the mission that you have to accomplish, like the only thing would be to stop that trade or to, just go back and get the Mavs another pick. Like, that would be the funniest all-time situation. The Mavs fan gets to the end, finally, you know, after thousands of years and days of just repeating time and figuring out how to work his way into the Mavs front office and set himself up in front of Nico Harrison at the time that, you know, how does he infiltrate all these meetings with Rob Pelinka and Nico Harrison on this day where he can just stop this trade from happening? And then he gets into the room and he's like, oh, you know what? If we had Davis and 2 picks, it might actually be a good deal. Get 2 picks. But either way, like, go in and adjust the trade. Because then what happens is you go in and you get the 2 picks and you're like, oh man, I didn't accomplish the mission. So would you just wake up the next day again and it just start all over? 2 picks, you didn't get them. And then you're trying to tell people, like, you go back when time resets and you're like, I'm telling you, there's an alternate timeline. The Lakers would have taken Anthony Davis and 2 picks, and they would have taken, you know, Dalton Knecht was on the table at one point. Like, that's where, again, it starts going. Those are the indefensible, those are the things that we're not defending. Not defending the Mavs organization and not defending the overall trade that was made. But come on, guys. Anthony Davis is elite, and now we have a chance to see him elevate in a way that is, you know, really special on an all-times list that was just not on the table for him before as well. Because this was on the table for Luka. Luka is at a point in his career. If Luka doesn't get traded to LA, again, go back to the, you know, tanking teams. If Luka gets traded to, sorry, Utah, are you the most boring team in the league? People want to say Washington, but, you know, Washington is like so stereotypically bad. Like, Utah is, you know, the second bad team. Like, they're not bad enough to be the worst team, but they're actually almost the worst team. But like, if Luka got traded to Utah, like, the legacy stuff for Luka is still all on the table. It's still, Luka is 25. Luka's a young guy. Luka, we expect him to win the MVP. We expect him to be back in the, you know, like, we want him to see him. Expect is strong words. Like, we want to see him accomplish all these things. We think that he has the potential to win the MVP. We think that he can get his team back to the finals. We think he can win the finals, and we think he can be one of these all-time great guys. Like, it doesn't matter at this point in his career if he's in LA, if he's in Dallas, if he's in San Antonio, if he's in Boston. Like, he's gonna have the same potential regardless. And Davis, yeah, I mean, I guess he still has the same potential, but the legacy stuff for him now opens up in a way that is, we have another guy now in the league, and that's fun too. You know, the spread of talent continues to, you know, the wealth gap continues to not increase. I guess it does with the picks in a little bit. You know, all these teams still have all these picks, but in terms of the players, I guess, you know, they're swapping players. So the Lakers have Luka. It's not like they're losing a player, gaining a player. But again, from the legacy stuff, like, now the Davis legacy has opened up too, and it's, where could he climb? Let's pull that all 75 list back up, actually. Let's see what other centers and other big men, pause, were on the all 75. Can we list it by guard? No, we got Kareem. We got Giannis. Barkley is obviously, you know, different type of... Don't get offended when we say different type of big. We're not saying that. We're saying, you know, the small ball center versus Davis, the career, the projections, the health, you know, kind of all these center guys. You know, we'll throw Cowens in the mix there. Shout out Cowens. Duncan. I guess Durant, there was some, like, I was trying to sort, because Davis is listed by 6'10", so I was sorting some stuff by, like, 6'10" as well, too. And it was like, Durant is, like, the best center of all time. It's like, well, actually, you know, I guess not center, more, you know, 7-footer, which he might be. Actually, no, you got Kareem up there for 7-footers. But, oh, Elvin Hayes, shout out. Moses, Karl Malone, making the all 75. Kevin McHale, Mikan. I mean, how much more work does Davis have to do to pass Mikan on the all-time list? Willis Reed. Again, Willis Reed was, I think, maybe like, nah, he might be like 6'10", but he might be like 6'8", 6'9", too. We might be getting a little small ball situation from Willis Reed. Nate Thurman? Underrated. Maybe we need to start talking about the Nate Thurman legacy instead of, in addition to, not instead of the Anthony Davis legacy, but in addition to, you know, Nate Thurman. Rest in peace. Shout out. All-time guy. But, Bill Walton, that was the last center. So let's see. I think we got, oh, wait, I left David Robinson out. I saw that one last second. Should I throw, now I feel bad just leaving Barkley off the list. Let's throw Barkley back in here. Shout out. Why wouldn't we, right? If we're ranking, and Davis, he's technically not going to be like center anymore, I guess. You know, he's moving into his power forward era. So we can put Barkley in comparison for that. Where was, yeah, David Robinson. Oh, Dirk, yeah. Dirk, Pettit. Okay, we got to double check our work chat. Make sure we didn't. Bob McAdoo? Legends! Leaving out legends. I think Jerry Lucas counts too. Hal Greer? Do we need to get a center? Was he a center? Hal Greer. Shooting guard. No. Hal Greer is a guard. Okay. Fair enough. Now we know Hal Greer. Respect. Let's see. I mean, yeah, look at this. Points per game, like we were saying. If we look at the per game stuff that Davis has done over his career, he is 6th all time for these centers. I guess all time, but, you know, the guys on the all NBA 75 list. The great players in NBA history. Anthony Davis is 6th amongst the big men in points per game. Wilt, Bob Pettit, George Gervin, Karl Malone, Kareem, and Anthony Davis for the people listening on Apple. Then you got Giannis, Shaq, George Mikan at 23 a game, Charles Barkley, Bob McAdoo, and Akeem right behind him as well. Pause. Win share per 48. Do a little advanced stats. Oh, Davis. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. David Robinson, the best big man of all time. In terms of a per 48-minute basis, maybe. Most impactful big man of all time, David Robinson. Even though he didn't win a title until Tim Duncan got there. But regardless, chat, what do the advanced numbers say? They say it's David Robinson. This is a great ranking. David Robinson, George Mikan. I'm going to steal that as my new 1-2 combo. I'm going to start bringing George Mikan up in all-time conversations. People are going to be like, you know, when people are like talking about Jokic and Giannis, top 20, top 15. They're in the mix with Hakeem and Barkley and Davis and, all right, you know, Davis, Tim Duncan, Shaq. Be like, yeah, and George Mikan. Because he's one of those guys, you know what? Are you going to stop? Are you going to halt the conversation to be like, wait a second, George Mikan? You're going to derail the point to be like, to let me know that you don't think that George Mikan's one of the 20 best players in NBA history? You're going to speak ill of the late, great George Mikan? Like, who's going to do that? You know? Dolph Shays? Maybe we need to bring up a really good one as well, too. Pause. But, I mean, yeah, like he already has the title over Barkley. Barkley has, you know, an MVP of the league and has that status of carrying a team to the title as well, too, even though, you know, unfortunately, MJ was the guy he was able to match up against. And Cleveland has stormed back here a little bit. They've cut it to 7. Second half just opened up. Mitchell hit a 3. So they were down by 10. They cut it from 20 to 10. And now they're in the single-digit range. Porzingis rolling to the rim. Fouled. Mobley. Got him. Porzingis going to the line. But, like, him catching Barkley, like, I'm just saying, like, he could be in the mix if all goes well in Dallas to now jump up in this range. Versus, actually, didn't it have, it has Simmons' list on here for the great players. I know it's a little behind at this point. Because I think this was like a 09. When this list published. Update the pyramid. 2010. Come on, 15 years. What are we doing? Luka's on the Lakers now. We got to get the pyramid updated. Where do you have Barkley at? Yeah, so he had Barkley at 19. Malone at 20. So he had Barkley right at LeBron. So again, you know, we're in the range here of, you know, Barkley's in the 20s. Garnett. Also, again, you know, similar to Davis where he won a title. And then, and Davis, 2010, wouldn't even have been in the league at this point yet. Like, we've literally been through the whole Anthony Davis career. We got to put Anthony Davis on the list. Come on. 96 players on the list, and Anthony Davis was one of the 75 greatest. We've literally added players to the list in other lists. And the pyramid is the pyramid's slacking. Maybe this will be it. I don't know if he was waiting for the Rem and Sam pod to call out the pyramid, but do we need to put a time limit on it? If we don't see a pyramid update in the offseason, we'll drop a diss track. 2026, if we don't get a pyramid update by opening day of 2026, Rem and Sam will be dropping a diss track on the Bill Simmons pyramid because it will be like 16 years old at that point. I guess no, 2020. We're not the 2025-2026 season. The lawyers rewrite the contract. We want it for this season, not next year. We want it for this upcoming 2025 season. Oh, Connie Hawkins, Arvydas Sabonis. I guess those guys weren't on the all 75 list. Chris Webber. Like Davis probably scooting him up over Chris Webber, probably over McAdoo. Elvin Hayes. Like Davis might kind of be already a top 50 guy. And has a chance now where Walton, title team, main guy in a title team. Stockton at 25 over Walton. I mean, I get it. Like Stockton had a great career, but come on. Figure some of the college stuff in here a little bit. Just for Walton gets the exception. Do we get to posthumously move Bill Walton up the list? It's like John Stockton's still alive. We move him down. Garnett. Like he legit, like I'm saying, with the playoff run, he has a potential to move into like a top 20 player of all time. And none of this stuff is being talked about for Davis. Like they're all storylines as much as they are for Luka. And as much as Luka is the guy that is the jersey seller, the guy that now is in LA, and LA, of course, is the place that is going to get the stories generated from it. But Davis's legacy is as much on the table here to move up and be affected as it is with Luka Doncic. And like I'm saying, maybe even more so, just the level at which it could have gotten to. Again, you give Davis a second title in LA, like that is, of course, going to boost your legacy in a massive way as well. But what were their actual odds of getting a second title? Like, I think they were kind of feisty as maybe a team to make a playoff run. But even if they had gotten into the finals, like, were they going to beat the Celtics or the Cavs or the Knicks, the best team in the East? They're, like we're saying, they're a feisty team against any team they play in a series. Even the series where they're getting swept by the Nuggets. All those games are close, They're going to be a competitive team, and LeBron and Davis are not going to be a tough combination to take down. But the odds of that actually happening, like, who knows? Like, are they that much worse than they are? That, like, actually, at the end of the day, are they that much worse for Davis winning a title in LA versus winning a title in Dallas? Because it's a different conversation for Davis than it is for Luka, than it is for Pelinka, than it is for Nico Harrison, than it is for LeBron. Because if we're looking at Davis' side, go back to Kyrie. Like, Kyrie as a number 2, with all due this is going to be crazy, chat. Like, LeBron is clearly a step above Kyrie. But Kyrie's shot making in moments, like the way LeBron drifts out in and out of moments as well, too. It's like the overall, overarching sort of impact of what you're going to get over the scope of a game in a series. Like, Kyrie as a number 2 in a playoff run, how is that 95% of what LeBron's going to give you? So I don't know if Davis's title situation is much worse here. Like, Davis is somehow the big loser and the big winner of the trade all at the same time, chat. And I guess we'll just continue to be the one guy that defends him. Should we just stop talking about the Davis trade? We've been talking about the Davis trade for like go back to the last, probably talking about the Davis trade for like the last 4 hours on the Rem and Sam feed. But there's other trades to talk about. You thought we would have started with De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio. Of course, the Spurs getting their guard, Wemby getting his sidekick guy, the move being made, and it being kind of favorable to San Antonio. But like we're saying, I just feel bad. Like everybody feels good about that move. There's really nothing to just be honest. We're gonna gloat about that move. So, I'm burdened for Anthony Davis right now, chat. Like, I gotta defend the man. I gotta make sure that the man's legacy is being upheld in this moment where people are calling him part of the worst trade in NBA history. It's like, didn't Olowokandi get traded? Like, some of these draft trades that have been made, I don't think maybe Olowokandi wasn't moved, but, there's been, it's like the worst trade. That's like, That's like when I walked into work, somebody was like, "It's the dumbest trade I've ever seen." I was like, "The dumbest trade? The dumbest?" I get it's not great. Is it the dumbest trade you've ever seen? It's Anthony Davis we're talking about. He's gonna suck now, Chad. I just know it. Pause. But either way, I'm starting to get too worked up, Chad. Do we need to take a quick timeout, a quick break? Shout out Pure Vita. Shout out BETSTAMP. We got more. Like I said, De'Aaron Fox is on the move. Myles Garrett wants to be on the move. The Grammys were making moves. Maybe we'll continue to react to that as well too. There was some announcements that hadn't quite been made when we got off the live stream on Sunday as well. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back after this to continue with watching Celtics Cavs as well too. See if the Cavs can make their comeback. Okay, chat, we're back. And the trade news, like I says, continues. Exciting trade news to get into. I guess, of course, Luka Davis is about as exciting as you can get. But personally, anyways, exciting. And it is exciting that we actually got De'Aaron Fox. I don't know, it's you'd be like, why would you be hesitant to say that? Why would there be any sort of, in your voice, why would there be any sort of thing? You got this guy at an amazing value, but that's the thing. Like you're saying, this hindsight 2020 after the trade, and when the rumors started to swirl about them getting De'Aaron Fox, it's not just a question about what you want to, not whether, of course, you want to bring in De'Aaron Fox, but now you start to get into some interesting team building stuff where, we talked a little bit about the second apron with the Davis Luka thing, and of course, the contract that they said that they didn't want to pay him for the health, or for the fact that he had these conditioning issues. They didn't want to commit this massive number to him, and now the fact that these massive numbers become even more impactful with this second apron, like, maybe that's a part of it, but just as a general team building sort of idea, what how the second apron is going to impact the way you're able to construct the teams. Like, De'Aaron Fox is obviously a great player, and obviously, you should be looking to add him in any ways possible. But now with this second apron, you just only have so many of these guys you can go out and get. Like, and you only have also, just so many opportunities that you have to go out and get these guys. And, like the old CBA back in the day, kind of, like, this is where the Suns got in trouble a little bit, because I don't know if they fully realized the mobility impacts of what the CBA and the second apron would have been, where, in the old version of the NBA from, a couple of years ago, if you were willing to pay for the team, like, you could kind of have as good of a team as you wanted to. Like, that was kind of the secret to the whole thing as well. Like, there was obviously the unwritten code of the loyalty that these players and these fans and these cities kind of all had to each other. And, once you got drafted to a team, like, the unwritten rule, I guess, that's the lore, at least nowadays, chat. You go back throughout NBA history and it's like, we actually don't know what was happening in the moment with the conversations with these players, but the lore was, you stay with your team and there's just kind of a general sort of loyalty there. But you could also, if you wanted to just pay these massive payrolls and pay these massive tax bills, have these great teams. And I guess in theory, you can do that now in a way. But again, it's not just that if you have an expensive team, it becomes an expensive team. That it literally handicaps your ability to build your team in the future. Like, that's what the hard cap and all that stuff is. We're literally putting a ceiling on how powerful these teams could be. Whereas, Golden State was just like, we'll just rack up the payroll. We'll pay Kevin Durant. We'll try to pay Steph. We'll try to pay Cable. We'll try to pay Garrett. Like, we'll just win titles and have this, build a new arena, and obviously, the team's different now with the new arena and stuff, but it's like, you get the new arena, you price out the season tickets in the lower bowl, and you get the influx of cash, and you have the new TV deal hitting all this stuff. And it's like, you're able to just, you're able to pay and you're able to afford this type of high level team, and you're just able to commit to it because that winning is going to be able to generate the dollar at the end of the day. But that's just not possible now. So while it would have been more, it would have been easier to take a gamble on a guy like Fox back a couple of years ago under the old CBA, because you go, if Fox is not able to become the second best player on this team, then we're still having the mobility and the ability to go out and get that guy and pay him and trade for him and do whatever. And, we're not bound to just kind of one or two players, but that's really what it is now, Chad. That is how the NBA works. The NBA is these high-level teams, not these high-level teams, but these expensive teams have one or two of these massive contracts. You have the Celtics have Tatum and Brown, and obviously they have depth around him as well too. But in terms of a big payroll number, they have Tatum and Brown, Porzingis, and that's a good example of a team. Like, you can pay for your team, but they had kind of acquired all those guys under the old CBA, and they got them all for steals as well too. But when they brought them in, you kind of pay what you have already on the books, and they can't aggregate guys in trades. They can only trade 1 for 1, so they just would have to swap one of those guys out for the same contract. In general, they can't bring in more money, or I guess they can bring in less money, but a team would have to be able to swallow up the rest of that contract. But they can't bring in more money and get more expensive via trade. It would have to be them extending Peyton Pritchard to them drafting guys at this point, or like we're saying, them getting way cheaper on a trade and then getting just way more expensive via extension at some point. But you've got the Nuggets, you've got Jokic and Murray. You've got these 2 high-level guys that you're paying. The Suns, maybe you get like a third-level guy in there, but once you hit that third guy, like you're kind of choiced and tasked now with either you have 2 guys in mobility, or you have 3 guys and like that's your set team, and you can't do anything else, and you're handicapped and all this stuff. So when I was looking at the trade going in, it's this is a point in the franchise where it's like, we're going to cash in our guys we're going to cash in our pieces for Wemby's sidekick, and we're also going to have to give Fox an extension at some point down the road, not even down the road, like in the offseason, he's going to be extension eligible, and he was talking about wanting to sign in San Antonio anyway, so he's going to want to get that deal done as soon as possible now that he's here. Like, are we going to be willing to give him that money and cash in all of these assets as well too that we've acquired in this pursuit of building this team? And it turns out they don't actually have to cash in any of those assets. We give up a couple of picks, and Trey Jones is obviously a great 6-man sort of off the bench point guard and a really stabilizing force, and is going to be a great beneficial player wherever he ends up in the course of his NBA career, if it's in Chicago for the long term or not. But with what we ended up having to give up for De'Aaron Fox, there's just no way not to love the trade. The fact that we're able to keep the guys that we have is a big deal, and the fact that we're still able to keep some assets for this draft and keep us in play as well too. Because we still have that Atlanta pick, and we still have our own pick this year. So we have 2 potential lottery picks that we can just add to the team, or we have the ability to move up in this draft as well too, and get maybe a high. And with a draft that's stacked like this, like, why would one of these teams want to split their assets like that? That's why would one of their teams want to, why would they want to, is deconsolidate a word? I feel like that might end up just being the same thing as consolidate, but why would they want to spread out their picks like that when they could just have the guy? But at least we have options in this draft, and to be honest, the future drafts are good, but chat, but I mean, we're seeing the Spurs, like we're saying, start to push their chips into the middle of the table now. So you would look at it and go, okay, on one hand, if you had a 29 pick, like, it's a trade asset one that you're giving up, so you could trade that for, you hold your chips and trade for even a better guy. Potentially, if Giannis becomes available, now you don't have even all your picks. I get that as well too. Like, trust me, I would love to have Giannis as much as the next guy, but but that is crazy. That's, what did we say earlier? I don't even want to remember the pause from earlier. This is an all-timer, chat. This is my bad. But, maybe it's nice to just be able to add a potential rotation guy on a cheap contract later down the road. But if we're adding a piece to develop and bring into the team and try to bring along over the course of a couple years, like, hopefully Wemby's peaking and we're winning and we're competing and we're just in a different phase. So if we're like, just in terms of, again, acquiring that young core talent, like, this is kind of the last draft to do that. And we still have, I think, our own pick in 2026 as well too. So, we're not like devoid of picks going forward. We're not, we're just kind of cutting off some of the fat from some of the picks, and our picks were kind of weird as well too. Like, some of them weren't as valuable as maybe you would have thought. So, who knows on the trade market, like, how hot they were in terms of actually, compared to some of these other teams with some of these unprotected picks. and that Atlanta pick was probably going to be the one that was the most coveted. And like, we literally didn't give up any of our top assets. We gave up kind of all the bottom layer assets that we have to get De'Aaron Fox. And that sounds, bad for Trey. Trey Jones is in terms of the picks wise, I'm saying, not for the players. Obviously, Trey Jones is a great player, but for the picks, we didn't have to give up really any of our premier picks. I guess, was there that Minnesota pick maybe in there? But, even still, 2031, we gave up Dillingham to get that, so, that pick was cursed anyways. But Boston back up by 13, timeout Cleveland. When Boston is not messing around, chat, they're the ones that are the dominant team. Pritchard stripping the ball away from Mitchell. Mitchell can't mess with Pritchard, chat. Nobody can this year. Pritchard's the man. But that's going to sound like a political statement more than just a joke about the fact that Pritchard's a sixth man. But, yeah, we didn't have to give up any of our premier picks. The young players that you would kind of ideally keep, we ended up keeping all those guys as well, too. And we're just able to just add this guy into what we already have, which is, the best possible version of what you could have asked for. And even some of the contracts, like we didn't even have to give up Barnes, I thought maybe Barnes would have to be in the deal. Collins, obviously, shout out Collins, but you're trying to move off that money. So, in one hand, Chicago, I think they're the ones, did they end up with Collins or did Sacramento end up with Collins? I don't think it literally doesn't matter. So that's unfortunate. Are we live? Can we cut that out? My bad. I felt bad saying it. But but if you're, let's see, did he go to Chicago? I want to say he did. Traded Kevin Love to the Bulls. Yep. So Kevin Huerter. So if Chicago, you're going, hey, Zach Collins is not as expensive as LaVine, but he was a guy that was just continuing to kind of be worked out of the rotation as well too. I think finally they're willing to give Bassey some minutes, or at least try to give him some minutes in the front court, and they like his dynamic there next to Wemby better. I think I agree, as long as he's not fouling out. So you're not necessarily, from a rotational standpoint, missing much with Zach Collins either. So you're still able to keep the guys in a playoff series that, again, Barnes long-term, you don't really know, like, he's a 2-year contract. It's a right now thing with Harrison Barnes. It's a short-term fling. We get it. But it could be a guy that could be an impactful guy in a playoff series if they're able to get there and able to be in big moments, and you're still able to keep him around in this deal. It's almost like, again, though, it almost is like the league is scripted, because this did feel like a scripted moment. Like, a lot of things have been beneficial for San Antonio, but the fact that it was this beneficial was actually shocking and incredible as a San Antonio fan to be able to not have to have that process of, with like Castle and with Johnson and with Sohan and with Vassell. Because, like, with what the Mavs fans are going with Luka right now, we talked about, like, we'd be getting De'Aaron Fox back in the deal. Like, we would be able to process it, Like, we were emotionally preparing ourselves to be like, oh, man, which of the guys is it going to have to be, We hate to do it. And again, pause. And that's why I was saying, like, kind of going in, I was hesitant. I was like, Vassell is going to be on a very, very nice contract if he continues to improve as a player. Like, even if Vassell is not the number 2 guy on a title team, if Vassell's this mid 20-point-a-game scorer that's making like $30 million a year, that's an insane contract going forward in the $70 million a year era. So you'd have him, you'd have Sohan on that initial extension as well. Like we're saying, you'd have Castle on his rookie contract, and then his initial extension is going to be kind of cheaper. So to have that favorable of a salary cap with, and again, even with Wembanyama, his rookie contract, and that first extension can still be pretty expensive for a young guy because he's going to be all NBAs and stuff, you would assume. But still, it's going to be like, for Wembanyama, you're going to be paying $50 million a year or so. he enters the peak of his powers, like it's just going to be a really, really great deal if he stays healthy. And you have the ability to just add a great player next to him, like we're saying, if Giannis becomes available. If Luka gets shopped again, who knows? Maybe Nico Harrison shops Davis. I don't know what crazy situation that would turn into. But this is a great move because, like we're saying, you're just adding him in. And the strengths of the players that they have as well, like, really complement his game. Like, Castle is a great backcourt teammate for De'Aaron Fox. Both those guys can play really well together. And people were kind of worried about, like, the Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox dynamic. Like, shout out to Chris Paul, Love having him. Like, I honestly, like, the Chris Paul experience is great. And he's going to be very important if this team is going to be a feisty playoff team. Like, I don't expect him to. It's just like, can we even make the playoffs, like playing game? And if they're just going to get there, Chris Paul is going to be a big reason to that, his leadership and his on-court impact. But people were making questions of their fit. It's like, we were already dealing with Trey Jones and Chris Paul. Like, again, we're literally swapping out Trey Jones for Chris Paul, or for De'Aaron Fox in this move. So I think Chris Paul next to De'Aaron Fox is just a better duo than Chris Paul and Trey Jones. So I don't know if we need to start having fit concerns for the players. And again, end of games, like, ideally, just because of the way you would hope Castle continues to grow as a player, ideally it's going to be Castle next to Fox, next to probably Vassell, next to, of course, Wemby, and then, Sohan probably in the mix as well too, but could be Johnson, Champagnie if you need the extra 3-point shooting. And even if it's like an immediate impact thing in a playoff series, like, that could very well be Barnes in that, like, 4-man spot as that, like, 5th guy out on the court. But Castle's defense next to Fox is going to be great. Fox hasn't played next to a backcourt guy like Castle, just that size and that defensive ability. And you're going to be able to put Castle on the prime guy. And the fact that's like Castle can be the defensive guy and Fox can be the offensive guy is great. But we've also seen Fox be awesome defensively as well. Like, to be honest, that's not something I don't know why I wasn't even thinking about that until right now. Like, the defensive ability of that backcourt is going to be crazy. Like, and you add that in with Wembanyama. Like, to be honest, chat, when I was looking retrospectively back at how I was thinking about that trade, I think I was undervaluing De'Aaron Fox defense a little bit. Because, it can be hit or miss. But when he's locked in, his defense is really good. And I think Spurs culture, the fact that he wants to be there, the fact that Wemby, while he can be amazing offensively, the defense is what's special. So defense is the identity of the team in a way with Wembanyama. Like, I do think he'll be able to lean into that really well, especially as the second best defender in that backcourt next to Castle. And then offensively, the pick and roll stuff that he's going to be able to do with Wembanyama. We saw him do it with Sabonis. Maybe Wembanyama's not the playmaker that Sabonis is, but of course, hopefully he's a better scorer, better shot maker, all that stuff. Fox is going to be able to have the room to operate. Like, this is just clearly the best team that he's been on, and it's not even just a Wembanyama thing. I think it's a spacing thing. It's a fit thing. It's just the young talent that they have. Like, who else have the Kings even, been putting around De'Aaron Fox? Like, obviously, the last couple of seasons with Sabonis, they brought in Malik Monk, his college teammate. Keegan Murray's a nice draft pick. I would love to have Keegan Murray on the Spurs. He would definitely be, he would be a guy that you would assume would be in that starting 5, I guess him and Sohan and would be battling it out a little bit. But, this first season he was 20 a game. 19-20. Luke Walton's the head coach. They had Harrison Barnes on a massive contract, I think. Yeah, Buddy Hield. Bogdanovich, okay, Bogdanovich, good shot maker. So same with Buddy Hield. This is kind of a fun offensive team as well, too. I think Sacramento's always kind of dabbled in fun offenses. Bagley, Bielitsa, Holmes. The Spurs are on pace to win 31 games this year, I think. 31 games again, and look at these losses, chat. Just getting obliterated every game. Same team. Oh, this was the Halliburton run where they tried it with Halliburton. And then they brought in Sabonis after that. So they've had a couple of years of this as well, too. We know where this is going. This has already started to decline as well a little bit. Davion Mitchell. I mean, yeah, outside of Halliburton and Sabonis and, Monk, like I say, Monk and Murray last year cooking as well too. The team in general, or a couple seasons ago, the team in general was a great 3-point shooting team that year and a fun offensive team again. But the role guys that Fox is going to play with is really, really great for him. 25 a game this year. 3-point shooting's down a little bit. It is what it is. But the Spurs don't necessarily need him to be a great 3-point shooter. Because, again, if you just think about immediate impact for what they've had this year, if you're just swapping him out for Trey Jones or swapping him out for Chris Paul can be a very efficient 3-point shooter, but he's not, like, how many is he taking a game even? Is he taking 3 a game? Is he taking 2 a game? He's shooting 36% this year. Okay, he's taking 5 a game, but yeah, 36%. He's not lighting the league up. He's hit a lot of like clutch, big moment, need it, or like, end of a run type thing. They've just scored 12 points and Chris Paul hits the shot to make it 15 points. I guess, maybe they haven't gone on runs that crazy this year, but he's hit a lot of his like trustworthy 3-point percentage is a little higher than 36%. But then again, just like game plan wise, it's not a lethal 3-point shooter. Trey Jones is not necessarily a lethal 3-point shooter. Castle as well too. If you're giving, some of the responsibility away from Castle over to Fox, like their team is already not a great. We don't shoot threes from the guard position. Make no mistake. That's Vassell. That's Johnson when he's cooking. That's Champagnie. That's Barnes. That's why Barnes has been so valuable. He's been one of the better floor spacers for this team. Same with Champagnie. But Fox, just his shot making alone is additive. Forget the 3-point shooting and all that. The shot making and the pick and roll stuff is additive. And his desire, I think, that's the thing that is making me buy in the most, is the fact that he wants to be there. And it didn't feel like a situation that was like nasty, Like we all kind of get it with Sacramento. Like the fact that he stuck it out in Sacramento that long, it's like, honestly, De'Aaron Fox needs an award. Will De'Aaron Fox get his jersey retired in Sacramento, chat? He won like one playoff series, but he literally might. I guess Sacramento does have like a good history, They do go back. Sacramento, Kansas City, Oscar Robertson. There's some guys in there. Chris Webber, those early 2000s teams, like we're saying. Does it show what jerseys are retired on the uniform numbers? Let's see here. Okay, retired numbers. Tiny Archibald, Mitch Richmond, Chris Webber, number 6 in honor of the 6th man. Bob Davies, Maurice Stokes, Oscar Robertson, Peja Stojakovic, Vlade Divac, Jack Twyman, and Sam Lacey. Is Jack Twyman a coach? Did he get retired as a player as well? Well, we don't need to dig into the old Jack Twyman days. Wait a second. Bill Dinwiddie? Who is this guy, chat? Is this some long-lost Spencer Dinwiddie relative? How is there a Bill Dinwiddie from the Oh, that's almost a pause, but how is there a Bill Dinwiddie and there's no relation on here to Spencer Dinwiddie? How many different Dinwiddie families are there? Diamond Bill or just Whitty? Later changed his name to Rashad K. Shabazz after his playing career. So, hopefully we're not saying a wrong thing there. It's just, I had never heard of Bill Dinwiddie before, chat, but shout out. So, if Mitch Richmond got his number retired by the Kings, I mean, De'Aaron Fox has to get his number retired by the Kings. Right, chat? What was Mitch Richmond? What was his Kings run like? I mean, Mitch Richmond, Hall of Famer. He's a baller. He's kicking my butt at the park. Make no mistake, chat. Oh, this was at the peak of his powers. Okay. I didn't know if it was Golden State or if it was Sacramento that he was mostly with, which one it worked there. But 23 a game for, what are we looking at, 7 years, 45% from the field, 40% from three. I mean, that's enough to get your jersey retired. You're 23 a game for 7 years. Is Doncic going to get his number 77 jersey retired? Imagine, chat. Doncic is 25 years old. Doncic got traded at 25. He's going to get his jersey retired. Imagine a player. Has anybody else gotten their jersey retired that soon? You know, is Brandon Roy's jersey retired? It wouldn't be at this point, would it? They may do it a little bit later on. But would Portland retire Brandon Roy's number? 5 years, 19 a game, 2 All-NBA level seasons? I don't think that's enough, chat. Was it 1 playoff series? Oh, 7 playoff starts. I guess that last year coming off the bench. Last couple there. Yeah, hurt. So, yeah, really that 1 playoff series, I guess, that he played in. We should have just been looking at the numbers instead of the game played. But, oh, yeah, wait. Portland. We're just doing a little retired numbers deep dive here, chat. It's just what it is. Sometimes it just happens on a Tuesday night. Let's see. No Brandon Roy for Portland. Okay. So we know that is at least is that like the best you can play without getting your jersey retired? I mean, there's no way Luka doesn't get his jersey retired. Look at those. I mean, the resume is just going to bring up why. It's just going to make you guys hate Davis again. But 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, scoring champ, Western Conference Finals MVP. I mean, he's a Western Conference Finals MVP. You got to retire the number 77. It's like, Dad, Luka Doncic, his jersey's in the rafters. What did he do, chat? Chat? You're probably not going to call your dad chat. What did he do, Dad? Nothing, son. He was traded at the age of 25, and we never really got to see his prime years in Dallas. But he was so good as a youngster that we still put the numbers up in the rafters anyways. Just because. But same with De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox, there's no way this number doesn't go in the rafters. An all-time leader, I'm guessing, in some various franchise accomplishments. Is he the leader in points? He probably is not. I get Oscar is probably the... Some guy stuck around for longer than De'Aaron Fox. But points per game... If he is the points per game leader for the... Yeah, Oscar. Okay, 22,000 points with the Kings. He's 4th. So Mitch Richmond, again, right in front of him at 12K. Archibald at 10K with the franchise. So, yeah, Archibald has his number retired. Sam Lacey, Stojakovic, all those guys. Oh, the voice is going, chat. The voice is going. It's just what it is. But... DeMarcus Cousins, not looking like he's going to get his number retired by the Kings anytime soon, though he did put up the numbers, if we're just looking at the leaderboard. But what was he? Points per game here. Value over replacement player. Sam Lacey, the best King of all time. De'Aaron Fox in the top 10. Not over Brad Miller or Mike Bibby. Let us know, chat. Who would you guys rather have in the all-time Kings point guard rankings? Would you rather have De'Aaron Fox, Mike Bibby, or Brad Miller? Rem and Sam on Instagram. DMs are always open. You can slide in there and let us know what you guys think. But where'd the per game go? Did I just scoot over it? Here we go. Oscar, again, of course, number 1. 5th, so he's 4th in total and 5th in per game. He's actually farther down in the per game. And I guess some of those early years as well, too. What was he, like 17, 18? I guess I'm just thinking, like, the peak De'Aaron Fox seasons. Archibald at 25 a game for his career. Weber at 23. Richmond at 23, like we were saying. Otis Birdsong. You can never forget about Otis Birdsong. 1980, 1981, All-NBA, second team, 24 a game, 54 from the field. What are we putting up here? At 24 and 3? Shooting guard, I mean, totally appropriate. 50% from the field. I mean, why is Otis Birdsong not in the Hall of Fame? What are we doing here, chat? We got, a good 8-season run here where he is at least 20 a game, 50% from the field. So it fluctuates again between like 24 and 15, but he gets to the average that you would need to be 12-year career, 18 points a game. He's close, chat. 4-time All-Star. Otis Lee Birdsong, put him in, chat. Just put him in. But yeah, 21 a game for Fox's career. For the individual seasons, I'm guessing Oscar probably had the best individual seasons as well. But maybe Fox has a better chance of being all-time for the Kings franchise in that type of way. Let's see here. They don't have the per game. I'm just blind, chat. They haven't moved around. Oh, Tiny Archibald has the best points per game season of all time for the Kings. 34. Jack Twyman is the only other non-Oscar one on here at 4th with 31. And then 2nd, 3rd, 5th through 10th is all Oscar Robertson. So, yeah, De'Aaron Fox probably not going to go down as the GOAT King. I think there's a couple of guys in there. Oscar, the PER rankings. Fox, nowhere to be seen, man. What's going on? Box plus minus. We even got a Mitch Richmond in here in the box plus minus. We got to find one that benefits Fox. Offensive box plus minus. Oh, Isaiah Thomas now has made it in over De'Aaron Fox. Not Isaiah Thomas. Value over replacement player. Mitch Richmond twice. Don't undervalue Mitch Richmond, people. Mitch Richmond. He was a baller. He would get you a bucket. The man could get you 20. Make no mistake. But I was seeing Fox Sports as well today, too, on the Coward Show when we were walking around. It was kind of a slow day at the restaurant. It felt like it was busy. It was full. The restaurant was full at one point, but I don't know. Maybe it was just all like small groups. Felt like it was kind of a slow-paced day, it turned out. But when we were making a lap around, they were ranking duos now that, of course, Wemby and Fox are together in San Antonio. And it is interesting to rank them as a duo because it is like, how much is Wemby carrying that duo? But Fox is, of course, a great second sort of player on that. And it is interesting, like, Wemby and Fox over Jokic and Murray. Like, is the strength of maybe a Wemby and Fox combination a little bit stronger? Murray, of course, is now, as we're seeing as the season progresses, continuing to round into form. So, we continue to believe in him as well. But, like Embiid and Maxey at this point, you're not going to take Embiid over Wemby. You're probably not going to take Embiid over Fox either. But would you rather have Wemby and Fox or Giannis and Dame? Something like that. Should we see where did Fox end up? He has to be over Dame on the old trade value. Should we consult the trade value? And Wemby was over Giannis. So I don't know if we're going to go like golf score on the trade value to point system and figure it out. But Chet and Shea or Wemby and Fox? I feel like just because, and I guess you wouldn't even say what Chet and Shea are doing this year. With what Shea is doing, you might have to just give him his respect, at this point. But again, in the trade value, you're still taking Wemby if you're factoring in the long-term ordeal of it. Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore over Wemby and De'Aaron Fox. Paolo and Franz, I don't think that. Shout out to Paolo. Obviously, Edwards doesn't really have the teammate. Yep. Ooh, Tatum and Brown. That's a good one, chat. Would you rather have Tatum and Brown or Wemby and Fox. And again, it's like, well, I get Wemby, so maybe I would just rather have Wemby singularly. But let's just say for this year, if you're trying to win the title for this year, would you rather have if you flipped Wemby and Fox and you gave them, you gave them Derek White and Drew Holiday, and I guess you have some guards there as well. Do we give them Jaylen Brown? I feel like that defeats the point of the exercise. But Porzingis, they get Porzingis. That's an interesting team. 3 guards and 2 7-footers. Porzingis and Wemby and Fox, Holiday, and Derek White. But you get the versatility with Holiday and White. Like, that's a killer lineup. Like, that lineup could win the title. You never know. The floor spacing, offensive back and forth that you could get from Wemby and Porzingis with Fox, carrying the backcourt part of it, like, could be actually pretty crazy. And again, they would have a defensive element there. Obviously, are we flipping them into the East? Because if that team is in the East, it definitely gets pretty interesting. Then you don't have to face Jokic if you're Wemby. You don't have to face Davis on the Mavs now, the terrifying Dallas Mavericks. But would you rather have Tatum and Brown or Wemby and Fox? Brunson and Towns? That's a good one. Towns has got to be pretty close on this list here. Oh, he's got Jalen Williams from the Thunder over De'Aaron Fox? Tough. And Steph still over Fox. Steph at 36 over De'Aaron Fox. At 27, the peak of his powers. That's tough. At least, now, what happens if they do this trade, Do the Sacramento fans start crying like the Mavs fans? Because this trade, again, with all due respect to Steph Curry, I think you could still win the title with Davis as your best player. I'm not quite sure at this point if you could win the title with Steph as your best player. I just don't know. But yeah, Chet's back in the mix. Jalen Johnson and Trae Young or Wemby and De'Aaron Fox? Towns and Brunson would be a good one to pick for this year for sure. Those might be the only... Oh, Durant and Booker as well. Of course. How could we forget if we're just talking straight up duos? Durant and Booker. Imagine we would have said Luka and Kyrie at one point, but I guess now we say Luka and LeBron? Luka and Reeves? Luka and Connect? I did see somebody post that the Lakers now have the white guy trifecta with Connect, Reeves, and Luka. They just had the Pokemon. I think they were comparing it to like some Pokemon. Or I guess maybe it was anime. I don't want to start getting different sides of it. Getting different people mad. I can't tell anime and Pokemon apart. It's all the same to me. That's going to be the most offensive thing we've said tonight, chat. Forget, trying to be optimistic about the fact that Anthony Davis might be a great player. The fact that there might be some artwork similarities between Pokemon and anime. I don't know how controversial that is in the old cartoon community, but but yeah, I'm super excited, and I'm glad that we still have the ability to do the future things as well too. Like, this wasn't a cash-in move, and that's not to disrespect De'Aaron Fox. That's just to say that, like we're saying, in this era where you have to walk this tightrope. Now, the extension part of it too is still a little like, okay, I need to wait and see what they're going to do in the playoffs to really see what I need to, feel full confidence in that extension. But again, with the way the rest of the team is so much younger, and with the way that these extensions are still probably going to be good values for them if they are, guys that are really good players, even when they hit that first deal, then you can afford a little bit if Fox is maybe a little bit overpriced. Because again, Castle's going to be a cheaper deal at that point, and Sohan's going to be a cheaper deal still, making, what Castle's going to have to make like an all-NBA. Like, as much as we love Castle, is he going to be an all-NBA guard on his rookie contract? I would love it. Make no mistake. It would be awesome. We'd have 2 all-NBA guards now because we have Fox. Fox was all-NBA. But, he might be in like the $30 million a year range, maybe, pushing 40, depend how much the contracts are able to escalate. I don't have those projections totally mapped out. But those are still hopefully going to be good deals. So Fox is not going to be too impactful, hopefully, just like destroying the books going forward and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the fact that you don't have to sacrifice any of the current, like the fact that you can literally just kind of do a guard upgrade and just say, hey, we're going to get off the Collins contract and trade Trey Jones. Like, it's essentially kind of a DeJounte Murray for De'Aaron Fox sort of deal. I don't know. Again, like, they kept the Hawks pick, but the fact that they were able to trade off these extra picks, they still have, the same amount of picks equivalent left over, trade some contracts. And again, they're flipping that guard position. Like, that's just kind of the progression that they were able to work through. So that lineup is really, really exciting to see how that could develop together over this season. And they play tomorrow against Atlanta as well, too, speaking of the Hawks. So Jalen Johnson now out for the year. Spurs fans, we're closely monitoring the Hawks because we have that pick. So shout out to Jalen Johnson. Maybe he's next for the Spurs. Who knows who we'll be able to acquire. But maybe that's able to make that Hawks pick even a little more favorable as well, too. So shout out. Welcome to San Antonio, De'Aaron Fox. And like we posted about as well, too, on the page, the lineage, of course, it continues. You've got, you got Duncan and Ginobili and Duncan and Parker back in the day. David Robinson, Avery Johnson, Artis Gilmore, George Gervin. The history of the guard-center combo goes way back for San Antonio. So it makes sense that Wemby, De'Aaron Fox, I like that positional dynamic that they get there as well, too. But as I was going through the league as well, because before this trade was made, I actually made a list of guys where I was like, okay, if we have to get a guy like right now, because again, there's a world where we just don't even trade for not even just Fox, but we don't trade for anybody this year. And we just run this team back. We keep the picks. We push it forward. Maybe we just, Giannis is the only guy, and we keep the picks and we build it OKC style. Like, who knows? But I was like, if we have to make a move to get a guy, who is a guy that I think is gettable, and who is a guy that I think fits kind of everything that we're looking for? And because Fox was the number one guy in the rumors, I wanted to see where he would end up fitting on that list. So we can go through that list here. And I was like writing down a bunch of guys as well, too. So make no mistake, there's a longer version of the list. But I was actually very, very glad after I made the list. I was like, okay, like Fox is actually like right at the top of the list as to guys that I would want to acquire if I was just looking long-term for San Antonio. I don't know. Do we just start it? No, I think, yeah, the number one guy that do I want to start saying this right now? Do I want to start making Fox jealous like immediately after he joins the team? But, just to, I guess, retroactively look back as to where I was at before this trade. Like, I made the list, and the number one guy that, like, long-term, who do I think we could get? Like, who could become available, but who could also fit next to Wemby, and who's just the type of player that I guess maybe me personally I would really like to have? The number one wish list guy for me right now is Cade. Because, I mean, obviously Detroit. Come on. Is he going to be in Detroit for forever? Like, how long is the relationship for that franchise going to last? The minute Cade requests a trade, it's like, I want to be available to make a move there. So is it, Fox? And, you start putting Castle on the board. Like, ideally, I'm thinking, it's Cade and Castle and Wemby going forward as a big three. But Cade would be the number one guy. And it's the similar sort of thing, too, where you get a guard, a pick-and-roll playmaker, but you get the floor spacing with Cade. Ideally, he is, near a 40% three-point shooter. We think he has that potential. And he is also maybe even a better playmaker. I know, it's different. He may come off more as like a traditional passer, but Fox is a pretty good playmaker as well, too. But Cade does get the assist numbers up when he's I think if his teammates obviously were some more consistent shot makers, I think his assist number would be way higher. So for me right now, Cade is, and I also made a list of guys, and there's a list of guys that's like, yes, obviously this guy is like number one, but we just like Shea, like, yeah, obviously Shea would be like number one. Like if we could get Shea, then we're getting Shea, but Shea's not gettable right now. Thunder aren't even entertaining. Even if Luka calls, Maybe they go, wait, you said Luka? Oh, that's interesting that you offered him, but they're probably going to hang up at the end of the day. Brunson was on that list as like a guy that, how much could you get? Is there a version of the timeline where Brunson becomes available? But it's also, Brunson's not available, and it's just very unlikely that anything ever happens there. Tatum, do you start like, what are the long-term odds? Like, obviously you would take Tatum, but is that, so I'm just saying, like, Cade is not the number one guy in the league that I would pair up next to Wemby, but that is the number one. I think that situation could go south. I think they maybe could have made an offer in the offseason if they had gotten really aggressive. Maybe Detroit is just saying no right now to anything, but I think they could have made an offer for something. But again, the Cade Castle thing starts to get a little tricky. But he would be number one. Number two is, I would still have Booker as the second guy that I would want. He's still a guy that I think in a playoff series is absolutely one of the best bucket getters in the league. And we've seen him take a team to the finals. Like, that can also not be underrated for Booker. I get he's had some playoff up and downs, but his playoff highs have been really high. But, if Phoenix is going to start trading guys, because again, they can't aggregate guys. So it would have to be a lot of stuff going back for Phoenix, and they would only be giving up one player. So if they're going to part with either Booker or Durant, would it be just Booker? Probably not. So maybe they traded Durant in this version of it, and Booker requests out, and which at that case is, that's the scenario which Booker is number two on this list, is things just continue to go south. KD requests a trade. KD leaves. Beal, that thing is just like, yeah, this is a lost cause. And Booker's like, I'm done. I request a trade. I'm out. San Antonio, we swoop in. But I got to be honest, like, I kind of think I would like KD just as much as Booker, even at this point in his career. Like, I don't know if I just have a, am I like a milf face for these NBA guys, Chad? I'm just gravitating toward all these veteran players. We're defending Anthony Davis. We're wish listing Kevin Durant to join Wembanyama. But, with Kevin Durant's offensive game, it hasn't, it still can impact a all NBA level. Hasn't necessarily dropped off a ton. He is still super efficient, and maybe even a little more likely that you could get him from Phoenix than Booker. And if that was the option, then you know what? Even at the rest of the league, if we're talking, again, that intersection of availability and talent, Durant is absolutely as high on that list for me as anybody. Now, if we want to bring the Luka conversation back into it, if this was Durant for Luka, I don't know. Maybe I would have the similar thoughts as Davis. I actually would feel better about Davis than I would Durant because of the defensive thing for Davis, which is obviously why Nico Harrison made the move. But Davis offensively is, of course, or Durant offensively is still amazing. And imagine just Durant next to Wembanyama. Like, that would be crazy. I honestly hope it still happens. Durant, you know what, chat? Do we move Durant up to number one on the wish list? Maybe we do. Especially now that, we have De'Aaron Fox. And yes, maybe if you're the Suns, you'd want to recoup everything you lost for Durant in a trade. But is that realistic going forward, especially when you think at the time that you're going to trade him, whatever that may be? So, again, like, are we going to give up Castle for Durant? Probably not. But, again, shout out to Harrison Barnes. But if there's some Barnes and some picks and some contract sort of ordeal for Durant, come on, chat. Durant, Fox, and Wemby, and Castle, Vassell, what are we doing? We'd be winning the title next year. But it would be I guess it would be Cade and or the Suns number 1 and 2. That would be the 1 and 2 right now. Either one of the Suns stars or Cade. And then after that, it would probably be Maxey. Because I got to be honest, again, the Sixers situation is going pretty south. I can't believe I said Maxey. Sorry, it would be Giannis. I can't believe I didn't say Giannis at number 3. I just wasn't. I had the wrist written down in the way I was going through the teams, not the order that they actually had them ranked in. But Cade and Booker would be at the top of the list. I just think not that they would be over Giannis. It's just that gettability factor. Like, could I see? And again, maybe Cade, because he's younger, the Pistons are less likely to give up on him. But if Giannis is not requesting a trade in this deadline, is he just committed to the franchise at this point? Is he secretly like actually in it for the long haul? But it's like, okay, yeah, obviously Giannis is on the list. Maxey, of course, like we mentioned, is on the list. And then at that point, like, I'm kind of like, okay, Fox is kind of the guy there. Like, I could maybe stretch the list out again. Like, if we're stretching the list out for Cade, pause, like, then you could maybe open it up to, if we're projecting out into the offseason, again, not maybe at this trade deadline, but for a move that they could make in the offseason, is like a guy like Bam, could he be available? Like, if I'm choosing between Bam and Fox, like, that becomes really close. I was thinking, like, worst case scenario for the Thunder, like, if there's an early playoff exit, is there some Jalen Williams potential? Same with the Magic, is there some Franz potential? But, even at that, like, Franz over Fox at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm probably, it's a close one, but I'll probably take Fox. And even Jalen Williams over Fox, Fox right now is, a more prime offensive scorer, at least the complete package as a shot getter, than a guy like Jalen Williams. So I think like Cade, Booker, KD, and Giannis, those kind of guys are, and even Anthony Edwards as well too, with the way the Timberwolves are progressing. It's like that's at least a situation to monitor. So he's on the list, but that's not going to be this offseason move. So to be honest, like this offseason move really would have only have been probably Phoenix or Milwaukee, and then we're looking at Fox at that point as like the third best option for if nobody had traded for him because of the San Antonio factor at the trade deadline, and they just go, hey, offseason, let's do the move. Now we know it's our guy. That's totally fine. So that actually made me a little more confident. Like I was saying, I was like, ooh, the commitment to it. Like, what is it going to be? But going through and kind of matching up some of that, and again, you just never know who's going to be available year to year. We didn't know 5 days ago that Luka Doncic was going to be available. So you just literally, you never know what is going to happen and what players are going to be moving into NBA. But even if I was trying to project a little bit, like immediately what situations could go south, because it's not like what could go south, it's what could go south and, who wants to get desperate as well. I guess, Boston, if they lose in the first round, like, do the Spurs want to get in a market for one of, like we brought up Tatum, is there like a Jaylen Brown market that they're getting into? But I don't know. I kind of do like Fox on this team over Jaylen Brown as well too. Not that Fox is just objectively straight up a better player than Jaylen Brown, but just that's a little more fun dynamic, I think. Fox on this team. Plus, again, taking Fox away from San Antonio or from Sacramento, adding him to San Antonio, like it's kind of like the Davis thing where Davis's legacy opens up in a new way. Like we're kind of adding Fox into the mix. Like Fox is kind of at the adults table now. And, it says something that maybe he need, some guys, they need to be a sidekick guy, of course, to be able to do that. But it's kind of like that. We bring up Klay Thompson all the time when we talk about sidekicks, but Klay Thompson, perfect sidekick. Love watching the Klay Thompson career. Everybody wants to have a Klay Thompson on their team. But, the fact that you get to be part of this trio and it's like our trio is the winning trio, like you're just carrying yourself with a different level of swagger in these circles, and like you're at the All-Star game, it's like Klay Thompson is peak of his powers, like Klay Thompson versus De'Aaron Fox, that's like a interesting who's a better basketball player situation. But the swagger which a guy like Klay is going to be carrying himself, a guy like Jaylen Brown, All-Star game, Jaylen Brown versus Fox, is Fox a better player right now? But Jaylen Brown's a finals MVP. Like he gets to walk around and command respect within the league because he's played on these contending teams, because dude was own right as well too, he's had big moments. But now Fox is in a position to be able to potentially command respect from these players by having these big moments and elevating his game and, commanding respect from the league, from the other players, from the legacy. Just, he's in the mix now. He gets to be on a team that is hopefully a contending-ish team, a team that is feisty and in big moments for the upcoming years. So shout out. Can't wait to see when he plays next, because like we said, they play tomorrow and then play Friday as well too. So there is a chance that Friday, I guess maybe the watch party for Friday is going to be The De'Aaron Fox Wemby era could begin in San Antonio. What are we saying, chat? Imagine if somehow the Chiefs kept the talent they already have and trade for Myles Garrett. Yeah, imagine, chat. I was thinking about the Chiefs as a potential Myles Garrett landing spot. And, of course, the NFL trade machine is a lot tougher to... I guess tougher is not the right word. It's just like a lot, like the mechanics of it, there's a lot more that can happen. Because the NBA, even before with the old CBA, like it still had a set of guidelines for the rules. It's just the guidelines were a little bit more strict. But, you know, it was still the same things. It's like you still had to match the salaries to a certain point. There was still a certain cap on players you could send out and things like that. It's just now, you know, certain teams can send out one player. Now certain teams can't only take like 50 cents back in either direction just in terms of the total money. But in the NFL, it's like you can kind of convert stuff into signing bonuses and waive guys and move guys here. And you can just kind of manufacture and embezzle money in the books and make these contracts work. So it's not like you can, I guess to me anyways, I don't know how to look at a team and go, oh, this team can't bring in Myles Garrett just because you know, again, the mechanics of an NFL trade, it feels like any team is able to open up space to bring in a top level guy. Pause. But is Kansas City gonna do that type of move? Because, you know, we also like to see them be a bit of a cost-effective team. Not that they're a cheap team. They are a smart team. But, you know, they've invested in the defensive line already. They have a guy there in Chris Jones. And I don't know if Kansas City is the type of team that is going to overly spend on one position, you know? Yeah, Katie to the Warriors for sure. I mean, just the defensive line, that defensive line alone would be the best defensive line in the league potentially with Garrett and Chris Jones. Like, there's not a better two-man defensive line combo in the league than that, right? I mean, Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, like, who else we taking, chat? DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. I think Lawrence is a free agent, though, this year, right? So that combination might not even be together. I'm trying to think. Is there a better... What's the best 1-2 defensive line combo in the league right now? I mean, yeah, it would definitely be... Maybe it's just to wherever Myles Garrett goes to, you know, next. But it just doesn't seem like that is going to happen. I don't know. Again, if the league is rigged, are they going to rig it Myles Garrett to the Chiefs? That would seem a little too obvious. You know, you can be like Karlaftis, McDuffie, they're drafting these guys, Xavier Worthy. Like, that's subtle. You know, you can kind of build their roster and, like, go, wait a second, how'd they replenish and get all these guys in there? And they still, you know, maintain a couple of main pieces. But I feel like I want to be a little more creative as well, too, just in thinking of what you could get for Myles Garrett, because this is the rare player that's not just in like an elite defensive. He's not just an elite guy at his position. Like, he is a guy that potentially transcends the value of quarterbacks. Like, how many non-quarterbacks in the league would you take over? You know, when we're saying quarterbacks, we're not talking like Derek Carr. You know, we're talking like a good quarterback. Like, you know, who's a good example, chat? Like, is Dak just the common example? Like, are you taking Dak or are you taking Myles Garrett? Like, you're obviously taking Myles Garrett at that point. Like, the eliteness that he brings at his position is just more valuable, even though, you know, a guy like Jared Goff, who can have big playoff moments, who is good in the playoffs, you know, that year they lost in the conference championship game. Maybe not this past playoff game with the picks that he had, but 2 years ago in the playoffs, he's had big moments. He's been to the Super Bowl in the past. He's competent in the regular season. Like, you know that your team can be a winning team with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a winning quarterback, but Myles Garrett is such a good defensive lineman and such an elite player at such a valuable position that I think he would transcend the value of some of those guys. Now, am I saying would Detroit trade Goff for Garrett? No. So in a sense, am I contradicting myself by saying that? But it's like, you know, Detroit's trying to win the Super Bowl. Again, that's kind of a, you know, they don't have a second guy there to take Goff's spot. If they were able to, I don't know, sign Darnold or something, like, are you thinking about doing it? But pause. But, you know, again, speaking of that quarterback value thing, they do have an opportunity, I think, here to maybe get a guy. And there's not a lot of like a 2 quarterback situation thing going on, but if you're Minnesota, I know the Sam Darnold thing ended poorly last year, and it's not the, like, let's re-sign this guy and run that back. But if you're able to turn McCarthy into Myles Garrett in some stuff, I don't know what that entire package looks like, because you've got a first-round quarterback going back for a peak of his powers defensive lineman. Like, I'm assuming the Vikings are the ones that actually have to kind of throw some more stuff in there. But you're not also having to take a massive quarterback contract back the other way, where you still have the Watson number to potentially be on the books as well too going forward. And if you're Minnesota, you bring Darnold back, you still have the main offensive pieces, and now your defense maybe goes to this whole other level where you're still, like, the defense was a big part of the reason we believed in that team, and Flores was there. And a sneaky reason why they still might be awesome, and a reason why this trade might be great, is Flores is still there, I believe, right? He didn't get hired anywhere else, not as a head coach, but he's not like a change of scenery looking as defensive coordinator somewhere else. Like, he's still going to be in Minnesota next year. So that defense is still going to be awesome. And that could really be like an identity as a team versus, it's kind of just like it was a unit that was playing really well. It wasn't really the identity of the team. Versus if they have Garrett, that's a game-wrecking piece at the end of games that you can rely on almost as much as you can, again, some of these offensive players. And the Lakers are up next, chat, after this Celtics game, which they did close out, shout out, 112-105. Luka Doncic on the court, not actually on the court, like on the hardwood sideline part of it, but not playing. But they showed him earlier walking out onto the court is what I meant. But I was thinking about and I was just kind of kicking around some trade ideas as well too, just when I was taking some laps around the restaurant today, busting some tables. But I was thinking about McCarthy for Garrett in a package there. I was thinking, do you go like a receiver route? The receiver route was interesting because it felt like maybe a guy like that could be gettable, but what would that really do for your team? Obviously help out your offense, but you don't really have anything going on at the quarterback position. So it's just like, are you going to use the Garrett asset to bring in a great receiver? But I was thinking about, like, what about maybe like Trevor Lawrence? Is there some Trevor Lawrence for Myles Garrett potential? Again, if you're the Jags, your offense really takes a step back at that standpoint, and you just brought in, Leon Cohen, shout out. We got a lot of faith in that guy to turn that situation around. But again, now your defense becomes, you got Trayvon Walker, Myles Garrett, and I can't believe I mentioned Trayvon Walker first. You got Myles Garrett, Josh Allen, and Trayvon Walker in that trio. And now Trayvon Walker's like a rotational guy. You've got this centerpiece duo. Now we're saying, like, with the Kansas City, if they had Chris Jones and Myles Garrett, like, that would actually still be, I guess, anywhere Myles Garrett go. Myles Garrett and any decent number 2 is going to be the best defensive line combination in the league. So I was thinking about Jacksonville. Of course, after this playoffs last year with Herbert losing now 0-2 in the playoffs, there was like, ooh, is there some Herbert potential? And the Chargers, they tank out, they get a quarterback. And the other thing is quarterback, like the Browns have that number 2 pick. So could you find a way to work that number 2 pick into the deal? So, even hypothetically, let's go back to Minnesota. If you're Cleveland and you value McCarthy more over Myles Garrett, or over Shedeur Sanders and over Cam Ward, and then you would just rather have McCarthy as your quarterback than staying at 2 and taking a guy. And it's not like, again, it's not the Luka thing. It's like, well, let's trade Myles Garrett to do that. But in the opposite of Luka Doncic, he's actually requesting the trade. So it's like, okay, his time on this franchise is up. And to be honest, like, Myles Garrett is the number 1 person in sports that should have been requesting a trade this whole time. Like, Cleveland we know what that franchise is. It's a disastrous franchise. There's just no way that they were going to turn it into a winning situation while he was there. And Myles Garrett, again, is absolutely one of the elite prime talents, not that we've seen in the league, but that we've seen in the league in recent history. He is a great defensive lineman. And he's going to be 30. His prime has just been potentially wiped away by this just terrible Cleveland teams. And They haven't been able to put anything around him. He hasn't been in any big situations, and it's been an absolute disaster. And he hasn't said anything. He should have asked out like 4 years ago, even when they were kind of semi-winning. It didn't matter. It's like, it's still Cleveland, brother. Just leave. No, I'm not saying the city. I'm saying the team. Leave the Browns organization. That's not a job. It's not a workplace you want to work for. You know, if your buddy was coming home every night, and telling you about his job, and like, I guess, why is your buddy coming over to you? If you're hanging out with your friends and he's like, every time you're hanging out, you're talking about like his job, and he's like, it sucks, and the organization, you're like, bro, this organization has like 25,000 years of bad history. Like, you just go get a job at a different fast food restaurant. Like, Cleveland is not the place you want to be, Myles Garrett. Go get a job at another one of these NFL teams. It's okay. You have permission to ask for a trade from the greater NFL fan base. Obviously, again, in the Cleveland fan base, much like the Mavs fan base, they're not going to want to see their stud go. But I think the Cleveland fan base is understanding. I think they'll get it. They should be okay if Myles Garrett wants to leave. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to hopefully see Myles Garrett on a team where he's able to contribute and able to be in like some playoff games and some big minutes, and they're winning games, and he is in a position to really impact, because his legacy is great. Like, we all know his legacy as like, his numbers are going to be great, the sack totals, all that stuff, but he hasn't impacted NFL history. Like, there's no moments, there's no real Myles Garrett moment. There's highlights, there is there's the talk and the play and the tape of him, like they were double teaming him, and there's that iconic highlight of him moving from one side of the defensive line to the other, and there's these two tight ends that are shadowing him both as he walks back and forth. And it's like, can you believe it? They're shadowing him with the double team as he follows up and down the line. But like, even Aaron Donald, when they brought in Stafford, they had that run. He was in the Super Bowl. He was able to solidify his legacy. Like, Garrett needs to solidify his legacy, and now is the time. So, I mean, to go back to what you're saying, chat, like, Kansas City obviously would be an interesting sort of Luka LeBron combination. Not that Pat Mahomes needs his career extended, but it's like, oh, this run is extended. They bring in Garrett. What, are they going to win 3 more in a row? The 6-peat for the Chiefs? But yeah, I feel like I wasn't even, when I was kicking around original trade ideas, I wasn't even thinking about that number 2 pick. If they could work, because that's a lot to give up Garrett and the number 2, but now you're getting some really serious stuff back, and these other teams, maybe they're more willing to part with some certain quarterbacks and reset it in a certain way. That's homework, chat. Friday, I'll be back with some Myles Garrett trades, hopefully maybe involving that number 2 pick. We shall see. Maybe more trades, because Friday will be post trade deadline, so we will be reacting if there is any more. Are we gonna get any more major moves? You don't know, because we forgot to mention this with the Fox trade, but I mean, that was similar to the Doncic trade in that it was just stripped down in this way that it was kind of this star for the star. Like, Sacramento was basically trading Fox for Levine. Not maybe the best player for player value move, but again, in the way the CBA is set up, that is just a lot of what you're gonna see. It's a lot of these. A lot more 1-for-1, where back in the day you were able to, and I don't know if they were thinking if they were capping the teams in the way as what they were trying to get away from, but the fact that these teams could just like throw together 7 contracts and just trade it for a guy, like, they didn't want teams doing that. They're like, no, you've got to trade a player. You got to try to trade good players for good players, a couple of contracts maybe. 2-3 contracts going back and forth. You start getting third teams in, it becomes more whatever. But if we're going to see more trade deadline moves, like, it's going to be that scale of things. It's going to be either the move of this role player got traded for 3 second-round picks and it doesn't really mean anything, or it's going to be the big, oh, wow, 1-for-1, 2-for-1 that these players are moving, and we didn't really see that happening. So we'll be back. Staying tuned this weekend for any big news. It'll be a fun little show. I think we've got trade deadline. I think there's a new Alchemist album dropping. I feel like we got some movies coming up as well too. We've got Captain America next week, But then again, Drake also announced that he's dropping an album next Friday as well too. So we got a little double Drake Captain America feature. I'm with the culture feeling. I don't know if it's going to be next week's episode, but we're going to be talking about him anyways because it'll be highlights. But yeah, that'll be it for this week. Like I said, stay tuned because Myles, Garrett, and more trade stuff coming later in the week. But the Lakers in one of their last games without Luka Doncic before he makes his transition onto the team. LeBron trying to get that, ego back a little bit, trying to get that perception back of, hey, I can do this too without these guys. I just took down the Knicks by myself. I'm going to take down the Clippers by myself. It's just me and Bronny against the world. We're like Tupac out here. We're good. West Coast. It is what it is. But you can follow us on socials, chat. We're on Instagram. We're on Spotify. We're on TikTok. We're on DeepSeek. We're on, whatever. Do the Russians have an app, chat? Because we'll jump on that one too. I don't know. But we're out there on social media at Rem and Sam, at Rem and Sam Pod. You can find us here on the YouTube as well if you guys want to stay locked in to all the live streams and all the content. The YouTube, of course, is the main hub of the Rem and Sam Pod. So you guys can follow us here as well. And like I said, we will be back Friday night. So hopefully we see you guys then. And thank you guys for jumping on now.